Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Aman sir.
Hare Krishna. Good morning, Manoj. How are you?
Hare Krishna, sir. Sir, there are 51 participants now.
Okay.
If they're joining fast, if you want to wait for 5 minutes, we can wait, else we can start and let them join during the course of the time.
As you might suggest. Right?
Sir,
It is your choice.
I had already taught, written in the WhatsApp group that they should join as fast as possible because these are the sessions where we learn a lot apart from the technical educations that we keep on obtaining from different sources. Although people keep on trying to find the, let's say, good health, good wealth, good everything, goodness in this manner, happiness. And when these kind of sessions are being organized, don't know why they are just 50. Otherwise, there remains almost 140 participants, sir.
Okay. That is understandable. I mean, it is often a ignored and overlooked kind of an aspect in our lives. But nevertheless, those who are genuinely interested may be here, and I just hope they are all benefited and whatever.
Maybe that's the type of reason that people keep on increasing the, let's say, hospitalization charges rather than
Yeah.
finding happiness in and around themselves.
Right. Right.
So kindly allow me to introduce you, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Professor Aman Batish is co-founder of Manas Mitra, a trust formed with the primary objective of providing assistance to persons with a mental illness and their families for therapy and rehabilitation. Currently, Sir is a member of State Mental Health Authority, Haryana, as a representative of the caregivers. Sir is an alumni of IIT Roorkee with bachelor's degree in architecture with honors in 2001. Sir is an architect by profession with almost 20 years of rich and diverse professional experience as a consultant, including working as a team lead on award architectural design projects, PMCs, building approvals, interior design, etc. Working on the projects from design to execution, providing comprehensive architectural design consultancy. Also an IGBC accredited professional. Sir is an educator and academician with a teaching experience of more than 4 years in the field of architecture and pursuing doctoral degree in architecture at the Department of Architecture and Planning, IIT Roorkee. That's how I know, sir. I got to meet sir at the time when we were like brothers from the different mothers. So our guide is same. Sir is holding sir is having an accolade in the form of All India rank 1 in GATE 2017 examination in architecture and planning. Sir is a Hare Krishna devotee and follower of Buddha Vaishnavism, the same as ISKCON, a disciple of H. Bhakti Yog Swami Maharaj, and a speaker on the subject matters dealing with spirituality, Vaishnava philosophy, and literature, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, etc., and their applications in the life for physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual well-being. Sir is a caregiver to his sibling and now dedicated towards working full-time for the cause of mental health and well-being. And through the NGO Manas Mitra, Sir is working towards helping the caregivers of persons affected by mental illness and their families in rehabilitation. Trustee Amrit Foundation Rishikesh, an NGO working towards education of hill students, health, infrastructure, and environmental issues in remote locations around Rishikesh. Sir, I would like to describe first about Manas Mitra. So we would like to hear from your side only. So welcome, sir, and thank you very much for finding time for this session, which is more on towards, let's say, technical issues. But AICT, I'm thankful to AICT that they have provided such sessions, and that session remains, let's say, it's mandatory session from the AICT side also. And I'm very happy to connect to you through these sessions. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Manoj. First of all, thank you for introducing me. And then secondly, thanks again for letting me speak on this important subject, which is often ignored and overlooked, as I was mentioning earlier. You wanted me to talk about Manas Mitra, the NGO that we have started for assistance in rehabilitation of families who have persons suffering with mental illnesses. That is, in fact, the primary objective with which we had founded Manas Mitra. Through my own experience, personal experience of providing care to a person with mental illness, the problems and the issues that we had faced and encountered during that process, that is what prompted us to take this initiative and start this NGO by the name of Manas Mitra. The other trustee who is there working with me in this NGO is also my batchmate from IIT Roorkee, and his daughter suffers with autism, and we both basically have personal experience of caregiving to such persons, and we basically intend to share the benefits that we have and the positives that we have received, and the help that we have received in our lives, the benefits that we have received in our lives from spirituality with people in general. And also we've done a lot of research about the issues that generally caregivers face in India because of lack of infrastructure and manpower resources. And the issues that and the concerns that they have, and we've come up with solutions that may be of help to such persons. And that is the objective with which we have basically started this NGO, Manas Mitra. And anyone here at present in this session, attending this session, if you know anybody, any person who needs help and assistance in this matter, or if you know somebody who is suffering from mental illnesses and he needs assistance in any way, you may contact me through Dr. Manoj. He has my contact details as well, and we would be glad to offer any kind of help or advice in that matter. Right. So with this brief introduction about Manas Mitra, I would like to now start with this session formally, if you may permit me, Manoj, so that we can finish in a timely manner.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Manoj. So I would like to welcome you all to this session, which is called Bhagavad Gita's Mystical Wisdom for Happiness. And what I would essentially be sharing with you today is knowledge and wisdom that I have received with the blessings of my Gurudev Srila Bhakti Yoga Swami Maharaj. The content, this knowledge and this message was basically delivered by Lord Krishna a long time ago, and Lord Krishna is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. So this message and this wisdom, this knowledge is eternal and infallible, right? And if we approach and try to understand this subject matter in this spirit, that is when we would be most benefited, right? And since as I mentioned, this knowledge is nothing that I have concocted by myself. It is basically what I have received through a long chain of disciplic succession, and therefore it is imperative to invoke the blessings of my Guru Maharaj and the entire Guru Parampara, so that whatever I may speak today is in line with the original knowledge, and without any deviation and any adulteration, even inadvertently from my side, right? So I would like to start by invoking the blessings of my Guru Maharaj. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Yoga Swami Niti Namine Namaste Bhakti Yogaya Bhakti Prabhupada Priyayate Nam Madhuban Ganga Dware Sthapitam Yena Him Charne Om Agyan Timirandasya Gyananjan Shalakya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Panghum Langyate Girim Yat Kripatam Aham Vande Shri Gurundi Natarana. So in the first section of today's session, I would like to start by discussing a a few of the common conceptions that people in general have about happiness and distress, what they feel, what they know about what happiness is, what are their ideas, the common ideas that they have about happiness, right? And then subsequently, we will be discussing about what Bhagavad Gita says about happiness, and what kind of solutions does Krishna offer to the problems that we generally face in our lives as well, right? So I would be sharing the slides that I have with me subsequently, as there will be a need for that. I would request Manoj to let me know if the screen is visible when I prompt you. All right. So let us now start with the content of the session. Generally, if I would like to start by asking a question, a fundamental question. What is the basic motive behind all our endeavors? What motivates us to do anything and everything that we do in our lives? If we, for example, those of you who are attending this session today, and the program on GIS and remote sensing being organized by DCRUST in general, what is the basic motive behind all these endeavors, right? If we try to analyze it closely and deeply, we would realize that some of you may be doing it for augmenting your professional experience, your knowledge in the field, so that it may help you ultimately to become better professionals, which will help you to improve your career prospects, maybe, which will be beneficial in maybe earning more money. And ultimately, step by step, if we go back this way, we would inevitably come to the conclusion that the ends for all of these endeavors is ultimately our desire for happiness. We are doing this, we are doing whatever we do ultimately to gain happiness or pleasure, enjoyment or satisfaction out of it. And the second aspect is, generally we might do it to avoid an unpleasant situation or distress or troubles. We all want to keep away troubles from our lives. Why? Because troubles make us unhappy, right? So again, fundamentally, if we see, it is happiness we are seeking through all the endeavors that we do in our life. In fact, this seeking or this pursuit for happiness is so fundamentally a part of human nature that it has been accepted as an unalienable right of men. For example, the country of United States, when the United States Declaration of Independence was signed, it was basically founded, the United States of America was founded on the premise of guaranteeing three things: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? So pursuit of happiness is that fundamental to our nature, that basic to our nature, right? So we are all the idea that I want to convey is that pursuit of happiness or seeking happiness is fundamental to our human nature. That is what we are seeking in all our efforts, right? But now let us do a reality check. The expectation that we generally have, we try to plan our lives very meticulously. We try to do things perfectly, plan our things so that we may achieve happiness, but inevitably we end up getting distressed, right? Quite often, in fact, happiness and distress, pleasures and pains, they come together in a package, right? I mean, for example, the things that we hope will give us happiness do give us happiness, but in the end, ultimately, they also end up giving us distress at times. For example, seasons is a common. It is so cold now, and we are seeking the warmth of the summers, and we are hoping that the summers would arrive soon. But when the summers would arrive, the same warmth that we are seeking would become the source of our trouble, and we would again want winters to come soon, right? So that is the nature of things in this material world, right? So fundamentally, if we try to analyze what are the causes of unhappiness or happiness, we become unhappy generally when we do not get what we desire or want. That is the first reason. And secondly, we also become unhappy when something undesirable or unwanted happens. When we don't want something to happen and it happens, it makes us unhappy generally, right? It becomes a distressful situation for us, right? So then what is happiness? If something undesirable happening to us makes us unhappy, and not getting what we desire makes us unhappy, so what is happiness then? Is merely the absence of distress happiness? If we closely and deeply analyze, that is certainly not the case, because if that were so, why would people um, take up to addictions, for example, even when they know that it is detrimental to their health? In spite of that, people take up addictions. If happiness was merely meant to be absence of distress, then by not smoking, for example, a person is perfectly healthy and free from distress, so to say, right? But still that person smokes at times, even knowing that it will be detrimental to his health. So even though, the point that I'm trying to put across is that even though the person is not in distress, but he is still not happy until and unless he has gratified his need for smoking, right? So merely absence of distress is not happiness. For happiness, something else is essential, and that is fulfillment of desire or satisfaction of needs. So that is an important element. Without fulfillment of desire and satisfaction of need, people in general, I would say, do not generally feel happy, right? So they feel compelled to do what they are doing because of their desire, or because they want to satisfy some need in them, to satiate some needs in them, right? So that brings us to a deeper, trying to have a deeper understanding of what are these needs and desires that we talk about. And I would like to share my screen now. So Manoj, please do let me know if the screen is visible. Is it visible, Manoj?
Sir, it's visible, sir.
Okay.
You can do it full screen if you want.
Sure. Is it visible?
Sir, full screen, no. The same.
Yeah, full screen. Is it visible now?
Not visible, sir.
Not visible. Okay, what I'll do is I'll share the screen rather than the presentation. Is it now visible?
Sir, yes, visible, sir.
Okay.
It's in full screen mode, sir.
Yeah, it's in full screen mode now. Right. So we were talking about knowing more about the type of needs and desires, right? So if we this is adapted from Maslow's theory of human motivation, and it is called the hierarchy of needs. Many of you might be familiar with this pyramidal graphic we come across often when we talk about human motivation and dealing with it in psychology. So basically, Maslow had devised a way of categorizing various human needs or human motivations for actions into various in a hierarchical system, right? So at the base, we see that there are physiological needs, or the needs of the body. We all need, food, water, and the basic human needs to be satisfied. Above that in the hierarchy is the need for safety and security. Now, these physiological needs are basically at the level of the body, or the sharir, or that we may call in if we try to correlate with the Indian system of philosophy, right? The needs for safety and security are basically the needs of the mind. It is above the need for when the bodily needs are satiated, then these needs are expressed. The need for safety and security, which includes financial safety, financial security, and safety from the environmental factors and other threats, right? Now, once we have satiated our bodily needs and we have achieved safety and security, we generally want something more. Our needs, further needs are expressed in us, and those are the needs for love and belonging, and also entertainment. Now, these are the needs of beyond the needs of the mind. And then there are also further, when we have achieved even love and belonging in our lives, we don't stop there. The needs for it is not that all our needs are met. Further, we also need then status, for example, in our life, social status, we crave for that. And then beyond that, also there are higher needs, which are basically needs for self-actualization, which are basically realized when we believe that we have achieved what we are capable for, and what we were meant to do in our lives, right? So from body to mind to intellect and false ego or ahankar that we call, there is a hierarchy of needs, and the bodily needs are basically the grossest kind of needs. And as we go further, we would see that the needs will become more subtle. Subtle means they are not easily manifest. The needs of the body are felt by everybody. They are everybody recognizes them very clearly, but the needs of mind are more subtle, not fewer people are aware of them, or more acutely aware of them. The needs of love, esteem, love and belonging, self-esteem and self-actualization are even more subtle. The Western concept, and understanding of human motivation and their understanding of happiness is limited to that. But the Indian system talks further. It talks about self-realization. It talks about soul or atma, which is even more subtle than mind, body, and ego, right? So we will be talking more about that. It is a different subject matter altogether. It may require another session if we want to go deeper into it. But for the time being, just to give to form a background of what we are going to discuss, I am presenting to you these hierarchy of needs, and specifically emphasizing the fact that you need to understand that the bodily needs are the grossest kind of needs felt by everybody. And as we move further up in this hierarchy, the needs will become more subtle, right? So we were talking about Western concepts of happiness. Now let us try to understand in a little more elaborate manner, what does Western research say about happiness? Who are the people that they have found are generally happier in life, right? And what are the concepts of happiness that they have, the ideas of happiness that is generally prevalent in the Western world, right? So contemporary and recent researchers have shown in the Western world that people who are generally connected with their friends, well-wishers, relatives, people who they feel they are close to, if they are connected with them, these kind of people are generally found to be happier in their lives. People who have been appreciated in their lives, whose efforts and endeavors have been appreciated by people who are close to them, or people whom they work with, they have been found to be happier. So connection, appreciation, these have been observed to be two elements of happiness. Acceptance, people who generally are satisfied and they accept whatever comes by easily, they have been found to be happier, as against people who generally find it difficult to accept whatever comes by spontaneously, and they struggle to change the nature of reality or their circumstances. So people with acceptance have generally been found to be more happy. People who know how to enjoy the smaller pleasures of life, they have been found to be happier by Western research. And it is also a common experience. If we try to consciously analyze when we feel happy in our lives, we would also come to similar conclusions, that people who enjoy the little pleasures of life, not waiting for the larger moments of happiness, right, the big bangs, the so-called big bangs, they are generally happier, right? Then people who have love in their life, they have been found to be happier. People who have experienced growth in their lives, be it professional growth or be it their personal growth, they have been found to be happier. And people with modest aspirations, who are not high flying, who have very, very modest aspirations, they do not want to achieve very big things in life, but rather than that, they focus on the smaller things. They have been found to be happier in general. And then lastly, and most importantly, recent researchers have pointed out, even the Western world has realized now, the importance of selflessness and selfless service. People who generally are engaged in selfless service, they have been found to be happier. For example, an example of selflessness is parenting or caring, looking after your children, because you do that without any expectation of anything in return. So that is the definition of selfless service or selflessness. It is common, or commonplace for parents to take care of their children. It is natural and spontaneous. But people who have been able to move beyond their their relationships and have been able to do good for people in general who have not been related to them by blood or through other relationships, they have been found to be much happier. The more you give, the more you get back. This is what they have realized. And this selfless service has been found to be a key aspect of happiness, a key element of happiness in people. And this selfless service applies, the principle of more you give, more you get, applies not only to money, it also applies to relationships in general, right? So fundamentally, if we see, there are two concepts of happiness in the Western world. The first is called eudaimonism, which is basically related with the satiation or satisfaction of needs that are related to self-expression, intellectual and ego needs, etc. If we talk about that hierarchy of needs, the needs beyond the basal needs of the body, physiological needs, right? And the second concept of happiness is hedonism or hedonistic pleasures. Hedonistic pleasures have usually extrinsic motives, the satiation of our biological drives. When we eat something good, we would generally feel pleasure, right? So it is basically connected with hedonistic pleasures, right? And this is generally the kind of concept that most people in the world have about happiness. Most of us can't really rise beyond hedonistic pleasures in our lives, right? But then the Western world also points out that the more you pursue happiness, the harder it is to get, right? That is also something that they have managed to observe, right? So if we try to analyze the common understanding about happiness, especially in the Western world, for example, and thereby the people who are relatively modern and believe in the modern approach, they generally have these two concepts of happiness. The majority have a hedonistic concept of happiness, which is stops at satisfying their bodily needs, satisfying the pleasures of the hedonistic pleasures, the satisfaction or satiation of their physiological needs. And some people they rise beyond that to eudaimonistic pleasures, which are or eudaimonistic happiness, which basically involves satiation of higher needs, which is the need of the intellect, the needs of the ego, and self-expression, right? Even in the Western world, this realization is there that hedonistic pleasures are, relatively a lower form of happiness, right? Nonetheless, most of the people have a hedonistic concept of happiness, right? Now, let us look at what the Bhagavad Gita tells us about the various types of happiness. What is its approach? And at the end, after the Bhagavad Gita has been explained and it has been summed up, Krishna gives us a hint to what is desirable and what is not desirable in terms of happiness, right? So Krishna, at the end, in the Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters. In the 18th chapter, at the end, Krishna talks about happiness in the mode of goodness, which he says is desirable, and then happiness in the mode of passion, which is more or less hedonistic happiness, which is less desirable. It is a lower form of happiness. And then he also talks about a third kind of happiness, which is called the happiness in the mode of ignorance, right? And happiness in the mode of ignorance is undesirable, right? We will come to these three kinds of happiness in the last section of today's session. But let us now try to gather some more ideas about what Bhagavad Gita says, right? So Bhagavad Gita, as it is by Srila Prabhupada, is basically the reference for this entire content that I would be presenting today. And in the preface to his Bhagavad Gita as it is, Srila Prabhupada says that people in general wrongly think that by the advancement of material comforts, every man will be happy. By the spell of illusion, one tries to be happy by serving his personal sense gratification in different forms, which will never make him happy, right? So Srila Prabhupada is telling us here what he's the point that he's trying to make is that hedonistic pleasures that we generally take to be as happiness, which we get by serving our personal sense gratification, these kind of pleasures, or this idea or this conception of happiness will never really make us happy, right? So then does it mean that we should not try to be happy at all, or is it something like that? That is not the case. So the question is, where do we go wrong in our quest for happiness, right? What is the real problem, right? So the real problem is that we are desiring the wrong type of happiness, right? And we are ignorant about right or true happiness, right? And that is what Bhagavad Gita teaches us about, desiring the right kind of, knowing what the right kind of happiness is in the first place, and then discriminating it from the wrong kind of happiness. What should we be desiring in truth, right? That is what the Bhagavad Gita talks about, right? So with this background, we would not now now proceed to the Bhagavad Gita's way. What does it tell us about happiness and distress, and what kind of solutions it suggests, right? And before that, I would like to briefly give you the context of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, as I was mentioning earlier, was spoken by Lord Krishna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and that was around more than 5,000 years back. The battle of Kurukshetra was the Mahabharata was it was fought between, as most of you might be aware, between Pandavas and Kauravas, who happened to be paternal cousins. Their fathers were real brothers, and the Pandavas had been wrongly their rightful kingdom had been taken away from them wrongly, and the opposite party, the Kauravas, who had taken that away, were not willing to give it to them at any cost, right? So that eventually led to the two parties coming face to face on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and they were desiring to fight it out, right? So but when Arjun was present there, and he observed who were the people that had gathered in the battlefield of Kurukshetra to fight him, he realized that quite a few of them, most of them were his relatives, and quite a few of them were his loved ones, right? So that perturbed him, and he became morose, and he did not want to fight, because Arjun by nature, he was a devotee of Krishna, and devotees in general are, compassionate towards other people. So it was his compassion who that basically, was dissuading him from taking up that fight, because he was not wanting to kill his own kinsman, right? So that is the backdrop. And then now let us come to the problems that Arjun was facing. What were his troubles, right? So Arjun says that I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsman in this battle, nor can I, my dear Krishna, desire any subsequent victory, kingdom, or happiness. Right. So apparently Arjun doesn't want to kill his own kinsman for his own happiness and to gain a kingdom. Right. But is that the real reason? Is that the only reason? That is not the only reason, because in the next shlok, the verse number 32 in the first chapter tells us, he says, Kim no rajena govinda, kim bhogar jiviten, va yesham arthe kankshitam, no rajyam bhoga sukhani cha. So what he basically says is, yesham arthe kankshitam, that all those for whom we may desire this kingdom and happiness, they are all arrayed on this battlefield, and they are most probably going to die. So what are we going to do with this kingdom and all? Because the very people for whom we are willing to acquire this happiness and kingdom, they will die. What is the use of these this kingdom and happiness? That is what. So this is the real reason. And Srila Prabhupada says in the purport or the elaboration of this shlok, that this is the typical calculations of the material life. That this is how people in general decide about what they want to do and what they don't want to do. This is the calculation that we make, whether it will be beneficial to us. They will quickly calculate their profit and loss. And they will think about their own self-interest, keeping the interest of the society at large and their duties in general behind. And what do we think? We think like Arjun is thinking now. He says that Prabhupada says that everyone wants to show his opulence to friends and relatives. But Arjun fears that all his relatives and friends will be killed on the battlefield, and he will be unable to share his opulence after victory. Right. So that is what what is bothering him. Like a materialistic person, he is thinking that he will be unable to share his opulence after victory. Whatever he gains, if all his relatives and friends will be killed, with whom will he share this? So this is the typical calculation of a material mind. This is how we like to think, and there is a term for this in Shastra. When we think about everything, when we we decide about everything on the basis of me and mine, what is related to my body and what is mine. This is called the Deha Atma Buddhi. And when we think that this body is ourselves, we have this concept of the bodily concept of life, Deha Atma Buddhi. And this is what is the real trouble. But then what do we do when we are faced by such situations? Generally, we would not seek counseling. We would decide the sole criteria for our decision making is whether what I am doing now is ultimately going to make me happy or not, right? And that is the only basis we decide about. And secondly, we don't even know what is the right kind of happiness and what is going to be, what might give us pleasure initially, but may ultimately bring trouble to us, right? So we don't have a deeper understanding of that, and we don't even seek counseling. We straight away decide on the basis of this mundane logic that this is going to be profitable to me in some way, and so I will do it, or this is going to be loss making to me and I will not do it. This is the only way we decide. But Arjun doesn't do that. He shows us what actually we should be doing. So Arjun says in the next shlok, which is in later on, first of all, Arjun then, once these kind of thoughts are entering in his mind, then first of all he tries to rationalize his thoughts. That is what we also usually do. Even if we know that what we are doing is fundamentally not right, we try to rationalize our decisions, we try to rationalize our options, right? So Arjun also tried to do that. He tried to present different arguments to Krishna about why he should not actually be fighting. It will be detrimental to the society, so many people will be killed and all. These are the kind of logics that he's presenting, but actually his primary concern is that who will he share the spoils of the war after, if all his relatives and friends are going to die in the battle, right? So but then Arjun doesn't take this decision by himself. He now seeks counseling from Krishna. He says, Karpanya dosho pahat swabhava prichhami tvam dharma sammood cheta yat shreyasyan nishchitam bruhitan me shishyasteham shadi mam tvam prapannam. So what he's saying is, now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. Right? So this is the process of realization. First of all, the first requirement is you should accept that you do not know, you do not you do not have the know-how or the knowledge to discriminate between what is right and wrong. And after accepting that, you should try to seek guidance from a person who is competent to give you guidance, right? And how do you seek guidance? Arjun says, now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you, right? That is the process of acquiring knowledge. He says, now please instruct me, right? So this is what we should be doing, right? So when Arjun approaches Krishna in this manner, then Krishna starts counseling him. And what is the first advice he offers him? He says, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. And they arise from sense perception, right? So we've talked about sense gratification when we were talking about hedonistic pleasures, right? So Krishna is saying that this appearance and disappearance of happiness and distress, this arises from sense perception. It has generally been observed by a lot of thinkers that situations in our lives are not distressful or happy situations. They do not have any meaning per se. We give meaning to situations. We decide whether they are happy or distressful for us on the basis of what we perceive is going to give us happiness or distress, right? So they arise from sense perception, and therefore Krishna advises Arjun that, O sign of Bharat, one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed, right? So tolerance is what Krishna is advising Arjuna in the first place, right? Then Krishna moves on further. He tries to, he knows that Arjun is in a state of distress. He's unhappy with the situation that he's currently faced with. So he tries to, explain to him the origin and mechanism of stress and unhappiness. How does what actually is causing unhappiness in him or distress in him, right? So let us now see what Krishna tells Arjun. Krishna says that while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. Dhyayato vishaya punsam sangasteshu pujayate, right? And sangat sanjayate kamaha kama krodhot bhijayate. So when we are contemplating on the objects of the senses, what are objects of the senses? We are aware of the senses in the body, the sense of smell, the sense of touch, the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, right? The objects or the things on which these senses dwell or feed on are the objects of the senses. And when we are contemplating about these objects of senses, a person will generally develop attachment for them because he thinks that these are the things that are ultimately going to give him happiness, and he wants to acquire them. From such attachment, Krishna says, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. How does anger arise? When these desires, when these lusty desires, they remain unfulfilled, then we become frustrated and anger manifests in us, right? And then Krishna further says, Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smriti bhrashad buddhi nasho, buddhi nasha pranashyati. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory occurs. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down into the material pool, right? So from anger, first of all, what will happen? Delusion arises. Delusion means you do not know, you are not able to discriminate between what is right and what is wrong. What is right, you think it as wrong, and what is wrong, you think it as right. And that is delusion, right? And bewilderment is confusion. When you cannot discriminate between right and wrong, you become confused, bewildered. And when bewilderment of memory happens, then intelligence is lost. Intelligence, what is intelligence? Intelligence is our analytical capability, the ability to, decide by logic what is right and what is wrong. So when our memory is bewildered, when we are confused, we lose our intelligence, right? And gradually, when we lose our intelligence, then everything is lost, right? So this is the mechanism of unhappiness or stress that Krishna is suggesting. And if we try to graphically understand this, we've talked about senses and sense objects, right? So basically, senses feed on the sense objects, and those sense objects, therefore, constitute our needs. For example, the basal bodily physiological needs that we talked about, in that hierarchy of needs. And when we start thinking about, contemplating about satiating these needs through the sense objects, they become the objects of our desire, and we contemplate, we put our mind to it, we start contemplating and planning about, how to acquire. So when we contemplate and desire about these things, then attachment, lust, and hankering happens, and these needs, they get transformed into wants, right? What is the difference between needs and wants? When we are wanting something, when we are desiring something only to the extent that it is necessary, that can be, called as satisfying our needs. But when we want something beyond our requirement, our bodily requirement, more than that, then it becomes wants, So uncontrolled desire, right? The desire to have unlimited amount of sense gratification and unlimited amount of things in our lives to gratify our senses, right? So this is how needs will become, through our desire, wants, and we will develop attachment, lust, and hankering for them. And when these wants or this lust is unsatisfied, when these desires are unfulfilled, then frustration, anger, and delusion manifest in us. And when that happens, we become stressful, we become anxious, anxiety and unhappiness sets in, right? And that ultimately leads us to our downfall, right? So what we are talking about is that uncontrolled desire is leading or transforming into lust. So this need for sense objects that we are talking about, through the mechanism of desire and attachment, this becomes want and is transformed into want and hankering. And that is the root cause of unhappiness. When we start hankering, lust, Krishna describes lust as the root cause of unhappiness, right? So then, if lust is the root cause of happiness, what is the basic requirement for happiness then, right? So now Krishna will tell us about that. What is Krishna's opinion? We'll see that in the verse number 66 of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Nastir buddhir yuktasya na cha yuktasya bhavna na cha bhavyatah shantir ashantasya kutah sukham, right? So this is the first hint that Krishna is giving us. Ashantasya kutah sukham. Ashantah means people who are restless, whose mind is restless, who do not have a peaceful and a steady mind, right? The entire meaning of this shlok is one who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can neither have transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace, right? So peace, or a peaceful, what peace are we talking about? It is not peace outside, it is the inner peace that is being talked about, the peace of our mind, right? So what Krishna is telling is the first requirement, if we go from back to in the reverse order, for the requirements of happiness, the first requirement Krishna is telling us about, for being happy or for happiness is a peaceful mind, and a steady mind, right? Because without a steady mind, there is no possibility of peace. And without peace, there is no possibility of happiness, right? Now, the first line of this verse is very important, but we do not have enough understanding right now to comprehend this in greater detail. So we will continue to focus for the time being on the latter half of this shlok. How can there be happiness without peace, right? So the first requirement, the core or the basic fundamental requirement for happiness is a peaceful and a steady mind, right? So then it means that mind is very important. And so we must try to understand what mind is in the first place and what are its components. So let us do a basic analysis of, what mind is, what we have come across so far. So the terminology that we have come across so far is senses, which includes the physical senses, the eyes, nose, ear, tongue, and skin. They are basically instruments of perception, right? The sense of sight, the sense of smell, the sense of hearing, tasting and touching. These are the instruments of perception for our body. Through these senses, we perceive whatever there is to perceive in this material world, right? And these senses basically feed on sense objects, which are mostly made up of dull matter, right? For example, food is basically made up of dull matter that doesn't have, dull matter means dead matter, which doesn't have consciousness, right? So sense objects are the things or the objects that the senses feed on. And mind that we have been talking about in the last shlok is basically made up of memories, hankering, lamentation, and desires. Basically, the mind is made up of desires, our wishes, and intelligence is basically our analytical ability, right? So this is the technology. These are the terms that we have come across so far. Now, with respect to these, let us try to further analyze what mind is, how does mind work, and how in that process can we find clues to what goes wrong and what is the right way to achieve happiness, right? So first of all, let us talk about senses and their association with sense objects. The input association is quite clear. For example, our tongue, which is the sense organ or the sense of taste, that would require food for as its sense objects. So the kind of food that we eat will impact the sense and also ultimately our mind. Similarly, for the sense of smell, aroma, for sense of hearing, association with other people and what we hear from them, gossip, for example, is generally the kind of association that this particular sense has. Reading is the seeing and hearing. These are the input associations for the sense of sight, right? Now, seeing and hearing also includes entertainment, social media, movies, serials, whatever we see, whatever we get to see from our eyes, right? So basically, whatever we feed to our senses is the input association for these senses. So the key question here is, now, if we critically analyze, is how to control the thrust to consume content, any content, for example, for that matter. I mean, be it the content on social media, movies, if we are talking about the sense of sight, or food, for example, if you're talking about the sense of taste. So how do all of these senses
they make us consume content. There is a thrust or a drive in us, a biological drive also, which makes us consume content, right? And the key question here is, how do we control this thrust, right? Can we control it, first of all, right? And then, it is also important to mention here about some very important aspects, and they are about boredom and addiction. For example, when we are talking about the thrust to consume content, it has also got some relationship with boredom and addiction. Many a times we do so many things which are probably not right, because we are simply bored by this. We don't have anything better to do, right? For example, we take up addiction. Many a times we may, it is a common conception that bad habits, we take up bad habits because of bad association. We also take up bad habits at times because we have nothing better to do, right? So managing your enjoyment and your recreation, for example, your urge to consume content, that is very important. But this is something that we often neglect in our lives. So Krishna said that in an earlier verse, Krishna was mentioning about lust. Now he's telling, where does this lust dwell? How does it work? Krishna says that the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So where does this lust dwell? As we were seeing earlier, lust manifests basically when we develop an attachment for the objects of the senses. So it dwells in the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. These are the three places in which lust dwells, right? But then Krishna also tells us further in the next shlok that it is not something that we cannot control, this hankering or this thrust to consume content. Why? Because even though the senses, they seem to be, driving us to consume content, but there is a hierarchy in this entire scheme. For example, when we talk about senses, the senses basically are consuming the sense objects or dwelling upon them. So Krishna says that the working senses are superior to dull matter, and mind is higher than the senses, right? So in the hierarchy, first, if we consider the sense objects which are made up of dull matter, the working senses are superior to dull matter or the sense objects, and mind is higher than the senses. So it means that mind should be able to control the senses. And further, Krishna tells us that intelligence is still higher than the mind, and the soul, Krishna is talking about the soul now, is even higher than the intelligence, right? So we come across the next term here, which is the soul, right? We've talked about the senses, we've talked about sense objects, we've talked about mind and intelligence, and now this entity, the soul, comes into the picture, which is even higher than intelligence, as Krishna is telling us, right? So the soul actually is our real identity. The other identities that we identify with, is generally a sign of false ego or a false sense of identity. Whatever position, for example, we may associate with this body, we may say that I am such and such person, I am a resident of India, so I am an Indian, I belong to this religion, so I am a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian, and then I hold this post in this institution, and I am a director of this institute, I am a professor in this college, I am a student for that matter. But all these posts and positions, they are not our real identity. They are, in a way, a false identity. Our true identity is basically reflected in the soul, right? So Krishna is saying here in this verse that the working senses are superior to dull matter, mind is superior to senses, intelligence is higher than mind, and the soul is even higher, right? So what have we talked about? We have talked about dull matter, which is basically made up of 5 elements: earth, water, fire, ether, and the Panch Mahabhut that the Hindu philosophy talks about. And our physical body and most of the sense objects are formed with these 5 elements. The working senses comprise of eyes, ears, nose, and skin, etc. And these are basically the input devices for the entire system. And the mind, which basically acts as the central processing unit, and intelligence, which is basically the logical unit or the arithmetical unit, and the soul, which is the real self, right? That is what Krishna tells us about. And this entire system has been compared to a chariot with horses, reins, a driver, and a passenger, right? So in this graphic, if you would see, the senses, they have been compared as the horses, to the horses. The mind has been compared to the reins which control the horses. The higher intellect or buddhi or intelligence is the controller or the driver, who controls the senses through the reins of the mind. And the real self or the consciousness or Atma, as we call the soul, is the passenger or the observer in this chariot, right? So basically what I intend to say is that, and this entire thing is basically the sharir, the body, right, which comprises of the 5 senses: mind, intelligence, and the soul, right? So this is our entire being, as stated in the Hindu philosophy. So if we try to analyze mind now as a system, see, the mind is the central processing unit, and there are inputs coming from it, and there is some output that is happening, right? So the senses basically are the instruments of perception, and the input devices, seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, all these things give some input to the mind, and the mind basically will process that information and produce some output in the form of speech and action, right? So what we are essentially talking about now is, if we want to control this thrust to consume what we are consuming, we would need to regulate, to do something in the system so that we can control this entire thing. So the obvious thing to do in a system like this is to the most commonsensical idea or the interpretation is that if you control or regulate the inputs, you will be able to regulate the outputs, right? So before that we need to understand what is the power of mind, what is it capable of. Krishna tells us about mind, that one must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. So mind is basically the instrument through which we can either deliver ourselves or we can degrade ourselves. It has the capacity to do both, right? So the mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well, right? So when is our mind our friend and when is it our enemy? So Krishna further tells in verse number 6 of the 6th chapter that for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So it means that for a person who is able to control his mind, this mind will basically act as his friend, and it will deliver him from all his troubles. It has the power or the capability to deliver him from all the so-called troubles, right? And also for a person who fails to do so, if your mind is not in your control, then mind will become your greatest enemy and it will lead to your downfall. How? Because as we've seen in that graphic, if you consider the senses as the horses and the mind as the reins with which to control the horses, if the reins are not in your hands, if you are not able to control your mind, then you lose control over the reins, and the horses which are your senses, will run helter-skelter. They will go here and there, right? So therefore, mind control is the mantra for happiness, right? If you are able to control your mind, you will be able to control ultimately your senses. And through that, you will be able to control whatever you do. You will be able to regulate the actions that you do, which ultimately is the mantra for happiness. And this is what Krishna is telling us. What can be achieved by mind control? Krishna is telling us that in the next verse, Jitatmanah prashantasya parmatma samahitah shitoshna sukh dukkheshu tatha manap manayu. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. So if we conquer our mind, what do we achieve? We achieve tranquility or a peaceful mind, right? Which we have seen in the previous verse is the core requirement for happiness. To such a man, Krishna says that happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor, all are the same, right? So it means that if our mind is in our control and it is perfectly tranquil, then the perception of happiness and distress, because Krishna has already told us that happiness and distress are nothing but how we perceive situations, right? So if our mind is tranquil, this perception of happiness and distress, this discrimination between happiness and distress, this will diminish, right? And to such a person, heat and cold, honor and dishonor, all are the same. So if honor and dishonor all are the same, you might very well get a clue that to such a person, a lot of the things that he is anxious about or distressed about will automatically go away, because we don't perceive it as distressful anymore. So what are the symptoms of a steady mind? A steady mind will first of all achieve gentleness, right? If your mind is steady and tranquil, you will become a gentle person. You will not become angry. You will not become, when something goes wrong, it is not that you will lose your composure easily, right? That person will have self-control. A steady mind will have self-control. Your senses will not drive you. You will drive your senses, right? Such a person will have forgiveness, because when your mind is tranquil and you are able to see clearly, discriminate between what is right and wrong, and not get affected by situations and circumstances, what people do to you will not induce a feeling of getting even with that person in you, and you will be able to forgive that person very easily. So forgiveness is a symptom of a steady mind. Determination, that person will be, a steady mind is very determined. Once you have decided that you have to do something, you are determined to do it. You will do it. Simplicity, you will not be attracted by the false pretenses and the glare of the material world. You will stick to simplicity. Fortitude or mental strength, such a person will have a lot of mental strength. Situations and circumstances will not easily affect you. Cleanliness, charity, renunciation, you will be able to give up easily, your attachment to things. Compassion, you will be empathetic to other people around you, other living beings in general around you, right? Not just men. You will have compassion for everybody, because you will understand and relate with the things that are troubling them. Just the way you are troubled by things, in the same way others are also troubled, and you will be able to empathize with them, right? A steady mind will have humility, right? It will have vigor, austerity, truthfulness. Most of all, you will become honest. You will not find the need to cheat. So in other sense, if we sum it up, you will basically be leading a regulated life, right? So what does a steady mind achieve? A steady mind will achieve a regulated life. And what can regulation achieve? In the verse 17 of the chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells us this: Yuktahar viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapnapabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. So a person who is regulated in his habits, who leads a regulated life, he can mitigate all material pains. Whatever pains that you experience in this material world, they can be mitigated if you lead a regulated life. So moderation is the first key to happiness, right? That is the first key to happiness that Bhagavad Gita suggests, moderation. So keep that in mind. We'll talk about that later as well. So we've seen so far that mind control is something important, because if you are able to control your mind, you will have a tranquil, peaceful, and steady mind. And with a steady mind, you can ultimately achieve happiness. So that brings us to mind control strategies. How to do it then? If you want to control your mind, how exactly can you do it? The first strategy that Krishna gives us a hint about is right in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna was counseling Arjuna initially in the second chapter, verse 58, Krishna tells us that one who is able to withdraw his senses from the sense objects, just as a tortoise withdraws his limbs within the shell, is to be understood as truly situated in knowledge. So the first strategy that Krishna is suggesting or giving a hint about is withdrawing our senses from the sense objects. Keep the horse away from the fodder. The senses, which are the horses, are feeding on the sense objects. So if you take away the fodder from the horse, there is a possibility that it can be controlled. But then the horse is hungry. It is difficult to keep the horse away from the fodder, isn't it? So that's a rather difficult thing to do. And that is what, why is it difficult to do? Krishna is telling us in the next verse, and he's also suggesting an alternative strategy for mind control there. So in the next verse, Krishna says, Vishya vinivartante niraharasya dehinah rasvarjam rasopasya param drashtva nivartate. He says that though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So what Krishna is telling us, first, the problem with the first strategy is that even though you may forcefully withdraw yourself from your senses, you do not feed your senses with the sense objects, but nevertheless, in spite of doing that, the taste for those sense objects, that you will remember the taste for that, for that enjoyment. You will remember, by eating that good food, it gave me pleasure, so I must have that food again. Or, smoking that cigarette, it gave me a high, and, it may be detrimental for me, but why not, get another kick? So the taste, so long as the taste for the sense objects remains, it is really difficult to execute strategy number one. So what to do then? You can adopt an alternative strategy. If somehow or the other you give a better taste, an experience of a higher taste to the senses, then it will give up. Just like if you want to take away a toy from a child, if you snatch it away from him, he will cry. But if you give something better to that child, then the child will easily leave the first toy, right? So if you give something better to your senses, then there is a possibility that the senses will ultimately give up on the lower kind of happinesses, right? So experiencing a higher taste is strategy number two, right? And that seems to be a better strategy, right? So is mind control easy then? Krishna himself accepts it is not easy. It is not easy at all. It is difficult, especially the first strategy, which is keeping withdrawing your senses from sense objects. Krishna says that the senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjun, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them, right? What does that mean? It means that even when a person has discrimination, which means that he is able to discriminate between what is right for him and what is wrong for him, even for such a man, the senses are so strong that they can forcibly draw away his mind from what he's trying to do. And we've seen that in so many of the kathas in our shastras. Even the sages who are self-realized and at a very high stage of higher stage of achievement in as far as spiritual development is concerned, even they have experienced downfall by virtue of their senses failing them. The senses are so strong and impetuous that they can carry away a mind of even a man of discrimination who has a relatively steady mind. What to say of us, And Krishna further tells that just as a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away man's intelligence. So we are talking about controlling all our senses, but Krishna is telling us here that even one of the wandering senses, the sense which is not in our control, even one of it, we are trying to control all our senses and our mind, but even one of the sense which is not in control can divert our mind. It can carry away our mind, right? So it is certainly a difficult thing to do. So then what should be done? How do we implement these strategies then? So first of all, let us talk about strategy number 1. If somebody somehow has a liking for that strategy, what to do? It is difficult, but it is possible to do. What does Krishna say? Krishna says that yato nischalati manas chanchal manastharam tatastato niyam yaitad atmanyev vasham nayet. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. What does Krishna suggest? He says that as soon as your mind, wherever and whatever your mind wanders to, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Immediately, as soon as your mind wanders, you have to, bring it back in your control. You have to bring it back from whatever has distracted it, right? So that is the strategy that Krishna is suggesting. But then Arjuna is apprehensive about this strategy. He says that chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramathi balavad dradam tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriv sudushkaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. He says that controlling the wind is possible. Ek baar ke liye, I can control the wind, but it is very difficult for me to control the mind because it is restless, it is turbulent and obstinate. And mind you, who is Arjun? Arjun is a person of impeccable focus. He is the person who, when his guru told him to concentrate on a target, when he asked him what is he seeing, he sees that I am only seeing the eye of the bird. That was the level of his focus, right? So Arjun is not an ordinary person. He is a devotee of Krishna, right? And for him, for such a person who has such amount of focus and self-control, he's saying that mind is restless, turbulent, and obstinate, very strong. I can't control it. So what to say of us, right? So it seems that this strategy is very difficult to implement. But then Krishna assures him in the next, he provides him the solution. He says, asanshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena chagrahyate. He says, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Even this first strategy is possible to implement. How? By suitable practice and by detachment. First of all, you've got to learn how to do it. Then you've got to practice it. Suitable means, first of all, you have to learn the right process, the right way of doing it. And then you have to practice it. And what is the next thing? By detachment. Now, detachment from what? That is the question. That is something that we'll deal with in the subsequent section of this session, right? But for the time being, what I want to stress is Krishna says that even strategy number 1 is possible, even though it may seem impossible and difficult, but it is possible to do it with practice and by detachment, right? But then again, this is not something that it is recommended, for these times that we are living in. We do not really have that kind of capability and that kind of focus and self-control to be able to pull this off, right? So then that brings us to implementing strategy number 2, which is developing a higher taste. Now, this is something that is plausible and really doable. This is something that we can do. What does it involve? It involves, how do you develop a higher taste? Controlling your association and thereby controlling your actions. We've talked about the nature of association of senses, right? I'll take you back to the graphic that, the input associations that I was talking about, the sense objects, between the senses and the sense objects. The sense of taste will require food, the sense of smell will require aroma, hearing and association will be required by the sense of hearing, and reading, hearing, seeing, all this, entertainment. So all these constitute the inputs of the senses, and they basically govern what kind of association we have, right? So if we want to seek entertainment, we will associate with such kind of content which gives us entertainment, serials, movies, all these kind of things. If you want to indulge in gratifying your sense of taste, you will try to eat good food and all that. But then the objects of senses that you offer to your senses to feed on, that is the association of your senses, the input association. So if we look at this flowchart again, if you look at this entire thing as a system, we talked about, if you are somehow able to control the inputs, you will be able to regulate the output, right? So it means that if you are able to change the nature of association of your senses, what do your senses associate with? What kind of sense objects do you feed to your senses? That will really be deciding what kind of output you will be getting, right? So if you are able to control the inputs, you will be able to regulate the outputs. So it is obvious now, if you look at this entire thing as a system flowchart, right? If you associate with bad things, bad stuff, bad association. If you associate with garbage, you will only get garbage out, right? So garbage in, garbage out, and that will lead to distress ultimately. And on the contrary, if you are providing good association to your senses, it will lead to productivity and happiness eventually as the output, right? So bad association, if you're gossiping, if you are indulging in bitching and backbiting people, and your association is that, where which it basically promotes you to take a bad habits, for example, then ultimately you will end up in trouble. You will become, if you are associating with drug addicts, for example, it is most likely that you will become a drug addict yourself, right? So that is the kind of effect that association has on us. So if you are able to change the nature of association of your senses, then there is a possibility of controlling the input and thereby regulating the output that you get, right? So controlling your action is basically what we are desiring, right? So if you develop a higher taste, if you develop a taste for better association, there is a possibility that you will, by virtue of this good association, be able to achieve productivity and happiness in your life, right? Now we come to another important aspect. Suppose I say that now that you have this knowledge about this flowchart, and henceforth you will engage in good association and give good food to eat to your senses. You will eat food that doesn't agitate you. You will hear content that doesn't agitate your mind. You will see things that do not agitate your mind, but things you would try to associate with better things, then you would be able to achieve happiness later on as a byproduct of your actions. But what about the actions that you have already done, right? The garbage that you have already associated with, and the output has so far not been achieved, that garbage is yet to come to you, right? The output of that garbage is yet to manifest. It has not yet. So what can you do about that? How do you tackle actions? It means that those actions that have already been committed by you earlier, in bad association, which are likely to give you unhappiness in the future, what can you do about that? You may rectify your future actions, but what you have already done is yet to come. So there the concept of karma comes, right? And it is a very subtle and a very infallible and difficult to understand concept. It cannot be dealt with fully right now, but I've just given a hint of that, because this will probably lead to some kind of the actions that have already been committed may eventually end up giving you unhappiness in the future. So what can be done about that? So this is where the second key to happiness, this shlok we have already come across earlier. The first advice that Krishna was giving to Arjun: O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons, right? They arise from sense perception, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed, right? So tolerance and acceptance. We must accept that what we are experiencing now is a result of what we have already done in the past, right? So whether it is perceived as happy or distressful, we must learn to tolerate or accept, because it is ultimately a result of our own actions, right? So this acceptance is the second key to happiness, right? So we've talked about these two keys. So if to summarize what all we have discussed so far in this session, in a nutshell, what are the key takeaways? First thing is that a peaceful and a steady mind is the essential requirement for happiness. And how can this be achieved? This can be achieved by controlling the mind and senses. Then second is the two aspects of mind control. First is controlling our actions, which is by moderation that we talked about. And second is tolerating the reactions, which is by acceptance, right? So moderation is the first key to happiness. How is it achieved? You control the inputs and regulate the outputs, right? And then acceptance, this is the second key to happiness. How can it be done? We talked about detachment in that shlok. It is achieved. Mind control is achievable. Krishna said that it can be achieved by suitable practice and by detachment, right? So what kind of detachment is being talked about? You must learn to de-link your happiness from desire fulfillment, results of action. Desire fulfillment is like, you must evolve from a hedonistic concept of happiness to a higher concept of happiness. You must de-link your happiness from desire fulfillment. You must stop this thought process that I will be happy only when my desires will be fulfilled, right? And first of all, why? Because we don't even generally in people in general, we do not even have a proper sense of discrimination between what is the right kind of desire and what is the wrong kind of desire, because generally we are only making our choices on the basis of a hedonistic concept of happiness, sense gratificatory kind of happiness. So we must achieve acceptance through detachment, and how? By delinking our happiness from the results of our action or desire fulfillment. And secondly, by satisfaction. We must be satisfied with what comes of its own, and we should not envy others. We must be satisfied by realizing that what is coming to us of its own is a result or a byproduct of what we have already done, and we must be satisfied with it, with whatever we have, not hanker for acquiring more and more, but being satisfied with what we already have. Right? And then lastly, we talked about two strategies of mind control. First is withdrawing senses from sense objects, which is a rather difficult thing to do, but possible nevertheless. And the second strategy is developing a higher taste, which is a better option. Developing a higher taste through better association, right? So this is as far as this session was concerned in the context of happiness. Now let us talk about, is there anything further? Is this all that can be achieved, or is there something more? I would like to point out to you that getting free from this perception and duality of happiness and distress is merely an incidental benefit of following the path of the Bhagavad Gita. This is something that happens automatically if you take up the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and start implementing in your lives, right? So what more can be achieved? I will just try to give you a glimpse of all that, and then we can end this session for today. First of all, we must develop a deeper understanding of what happiness is. We must understand, initially, I had pointed out that where do we go wrong in our pursuit for happiness? Fundamentally, we go wrong in not even knowing what kind of happiness is desirable and what kind of happiness is not desirable, right? We are ignorant about what to desire and what not to desire, first of all. So we must know what is true happiness, first of all. So Krishna, now, initially I had told you that, Bhagavad Gita talks about three kinds of happiness: happiness in the mode of goodness, happiness in the mode of passion, and happiness in the mode of ignorance. So what is this happiness in the mode of goodness, which is desirable happiness? Krishna says in verse number 37 of the 18th chapter, that which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which one awakens to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness, right? So this is the higher taste that we are talking about. We must try to seek and desire happiness that leads us to self-realization. Self-realization is, what is self-realization? In a nutshell, I will say that when you develop this understanding, this deeper understanding that you are not this body, but the soul, and you disassociate yourself from your false ego or the false identity that you have developed out of believing that your body is yourself, and thereby, accepting your position, your status in the society, the nationality that you're born with, the religion that you're born into, accepting that as your real identity. If you seek the kind of happiness that takes you beyond that to the stage of self-realization, that is the kind of happiness that we must desire. So this is the higher taste that we are talking about. You must develop a taste for this kind of happiness. And what is the inferior or hedonistic kind of happiness that you are talking about? Krishna says in the next verse that happiness which is derived from the contact of the senses with their objects and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion, right? So this is the inferior hedonistic kind of happiness that we are talking about. And that is the concept of happiness that most people have in their minds, right? So, but we certainly do get pleasure, but we generally confuse happiness with pleasure. Pleasure is short-lived. Whenever you indulge in sense gratification, you will certainly get pleasure out of it because your need is being satiated. But when you develop an attachment for this kind of need satiation, then you will again and again fall in this trap of, getting that transitory and short-lived pleasure, instant, momentary pleasure, but then it will soon be followed up by something which is not very pleasing to you. It is nectar at first, but poison at the end. That is what Krishna is telling. We can try to understand this with the example of, somebody indulging in addiction. when a person indulges in addiction, what is the motivation for him? He knows, most of the people know that it is detrimental for his health, yet that person indulges because it is giving him instantaneous sense gratification. He experiences a high from it, but then ultimately, once that stage has been crossed, that high has been achieved, he is in a very bad position. Most of us who indulge in drinking, for example, will know that if you drink quite a lot, the next day you are certain to have a hangover, right? So if we fall in this trap of hedonistic happiness, the nature of all kind of hedonistic happinesses is like that only. You will experience instantaneous, you will experience a high, but then the hangover will inadvertently follow, right? So this is not the kind of happiness that is really desirable. It is a inferior kind of happiness. People indulge in it, but it is certainly less desirable, right? And what then is the most undesirable kind of happiness? Krishna says that the happiness which is blind to self-realization, I mean, which takes you away from your true self, and which basically promotes your false ego. It bolsters and puffs up your false ego, which is delusion from beginning to the end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be of the nature of ignorance. And this kind of happiness is most undesirable, right? So this is something that we need to avoid in our lives. Sleep, laziness, and illusion. Illusion is you perceive something that doesn't really exist as the reality or truth, right? So then we come to transcendental intelligence, or connecting with the supreme. The concept of a higher taste that we were talking about, that comes with developing a transcendental intelligence. You must starve your material mind and you must feed your spiritual mind, right? What is material mind? Material mind is that which is always thinking about your false identity. It is related to your false ego, your false sense of identity. I am this, I am that, I am Hindu, I am Christian, I am Indian, I am a professor, I am this, I am that. Everything related to your body, right? So if you must try to starve your material mind and feed your spiritual mind. You must seek self-realization. And how is that done? Through transcendental intelligence. That is what Krishna was talking about. The real requirement. This shlok that I said that we will talk about the first line later on. Krishna says, Nasti buddhir yuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavna nacha bhavyatah shanti ashantasya kutah sukham. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be happiness without peace? All that we have discussed so far, we can try to, adapt all this in our lives, try to develop a higher taste and all. But the truth of the matter is that without being connected with the Supreme, or Krishna consciousness as we call it, without being self-realized, without having a realization of the super soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and being connected with him, artificially it is very difficult to do. So that is why developing a higher taste and having a connection, understanding, or a concept of a supreme person is very important and integral, because that is what facilitates really the development of a higher taste. That really is the real requirement, right? So and then Krishna, we must inquire about the higher truths of life. And what does Krishna tells us about these higher truths? In the chapter 15, verse number 7, Krishna says, Mame vansho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shasthani indriyani prakritisthani karshati. The living entities in this conditional world are my internal fragmental parts. But due to conditional life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which includes the mind. So we are unnecessarily struggling very hard in this material world. There is no need for that. Because why? Because we are in reality, in truth, the eternal parts and fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. But the thing is, we don't realize it. We have forgotten that fact. And it is because of this forgetfulness that we really are suffering in this material world, right? So this is the higher truth that we must realize. But then it is not something that is very easy to do, and it doesn't come really naturally to most of the men. And what Srila Prabhupada, in fact, in his introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, as it is says, and I'm quoting as such, that out of so many human beings who are suffering, there are only a few who actually inquire about their real position as to why they are put into this awkward position, why they are suffering, and so on. Unless one is awakened to this position of questioning his suffering, unless he realizes that he doesn't want suffering but happiness, and rather wants to make a solution to all these sufferings, then one is not to be considered a perfect human being. The Shastra tells us that this inquiry, unless this is awakened in us, we can't even be called, we are not even be fit to call a perfect human being, let alone, let us leave aside self-realization and the higher truths. Okay? If this inquiry of why we are put in this awkward position and this position of suffering, Prabhupada says that humanity begins when this sort of inquiry is awakened in this mind. In the Brahma Sutra or the Vedanta Sutra, this inquiry is called Brahma Jigyasa, right? So what more is there to be achieved? We have to make this inquiry. Atatho Brahma Jigyasa. Now, after this, let us inquire about the absolute truth. This is the beginning of Vedanta Sutra, the first shlok of Vedanta Sutra, first sutra, and this is the beginning of a spiritual life. Now, after this, let us inquire about the absolute truth. But where to inquire from? Whom to ask? Krishna tells us, in the 4th chapter, verse number 34, he says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. Why can a self-realized soul impart you knowledge? Because he has seen the truth. Now, Krishna says, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena seveya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanin astadva darshina. Pranipat karo guru ko. You have to approach the spiritual master. How? Submissively, render him service, and do what? Inquire from him. Questioning, clarifying your doubts, asking him questions is what is going to really clarify your mind. That is what is going to rid you of your ignorance, and it will give you the discrimination to judge what is right from wrong, right? And the self-realized soul, the guru who is self-realized, can impart you the truth, true knowledge. Because why? Because he has seen the truth, right? So this is the process. This is what we should actually be doing. This is what we can do further. What more? Because happiness and distress, mitigation of distresses, and and getting happy are just the incidental benefits of this path. This is achieved by default. When you start doing it, happiness and your perception of this duality of happiness and distress, it will automatically be rectified when you are on this path, right? So with this, I would like to end my talk today, and I would invite questions now. If there are any clarifications that anybody wants to have, I would be most glad to address those doubts to the best of my capability. And in fact, I would like to bring to your notice that it is recommended in the Shastra that, as we have seen in this shlok, that we must ask questions, because that is what will really clarify our doubts, and our understanding will be corrected if we are on the wrong, if we have a false understanding or a wrong understanding. It is the duty of the speaker to clarify the doubts, and it is the duty of the attendees or the participants to ask the questions. So thank you. Thanks a lot for this, for your time, and any questions are most welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. And participants, if they want to ask, clarify regarding Bhagavad Gita's mystical wisdom, sir is available and sir is very knowledgeable in this manner, because like last time we heard from sir, so in the similar topic, the way he is presenting and all these like difficult shloks to understand, because sir, after our last discussion I tried to listen Shrimad Bhagavad Gita by Shailendra Bhari. So I tried to listen him and I could complete it twice to just to understand it, and I tried to read also uh, Bhagavad uh, Bhagavad Gita, that Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. So
Yeah.
I tried to read his version also.
Right.
So, but I couldn't understand. I'm still in the learning stage, so I'll try to improve. And by the time I'll start understanding something, so at that time I'll start seeking these questions and try to quest my desires and thoughts that are coming. So, like our last discussion was more on improve how to improve the taste. So I try to improve the taste also. So that those changes I'm feeling in after your discussions, and also like you are in Bhagavad Gita also they say that the try to minimize the desires or the controlling the inputs like you suggested. So those kind of changes I could feel, and by helping others also we feel happiness. So but during this period of time when we keep on setting targets in our professional life to achieve higher, because in any of the sphere when we try to go ahead with achieving higher in form of knowledge, in form of, let's say, any physical kind of matter which we want to achieve. So at that point of time, in the quest of achieving this higher, we keep on like making these people feel happy, unhappy from our deeds. So how to like realize whether that was okay or not okay? That's like Bhagavad Gita's keep on doing your actions and do not seek for the final outcome. So, but how to decide whether these are like fine or not fine? How to control that? Means how to control that mind, because at the end of the day we keep on saying okay, after at the end of the day when we keep on summarizing our thoughts and the actions towards the end day's end. So at that point of time we have a feeling, okay, this was the work I shouldn't have done, this might have hurt somebody. So how to control those kind of things?
So Manoj, first of all, I would like to congratulate you that, after the last session, you say that you have tried to acquire a greater understanding, a deeper understanding of the Bhagavad Gita by hearing to, other devotees and persons who have spoken about the Bhagavad Gita. And we've also tried to read from the Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Prabhupada. Now, I'm really happy to hear that you have taken that initiative and you've taken a step forward. Now, coming to the question that you asked is a bona fide question. It is something that we all experience in our day-to-day lives, especially when we just start taking our initial first steps. These kind of, the very fact that you are having this realization that in the course of doing your actions, you may inadvertently, make some people happy and some people distressed, is a sign of the fact that you are becoming open, to these realizations. Because most of the people, they do not really give even a thought to this when they are doing their actions. Now, to mitigate your doubt, I would like to tell you that, you see, this process is a gradual process. First of all, it is not that one fine day you suddenly start reading the Bhagavad Gita and the very next day, automatically a change will happen, right? It is a very gradual process. It takes, depending on what state we are in, because our conditioning is very deep rooted. It is not that we have become today what we are overnight. The conditioning involves the kind of upbringing that you have received from your family. It involves the kind of association that you have had in your life with your peers, with your friends, with your colleagues in your profession, right? With your interaction in the society, whatever experiences, good or bad, you have had in the society, all that has had an impact on you.
Now, this is, I don't know if you believe in the concept of reincarnation and Atma and, previous births and all that, but at least if we talk about just this birth, there is so much that has gone into making us what we are, right? What to speak about the kind of sanskars or the kind of conditioning that we have acquired in the so many innumerable births that we may have taken before this, right? And all that is a part of our subtle body. When the soul transmigrates from one body to another body, the gross body or the physical body that we have is destroyed, but the conditioning that we have had in that previous birth is transmigrated with the soul in the form of the Sukshma Sharir, or which is made up of Man, Buddhi and Ahankar, right? So that transmigrates to the next birth. So that conditioning is still there, even though you do not remember about it. But we say that everybody has an inherent nature. How does that inherent nature come, right? It is in part by whatever we acquire through the experiences in this birth, and it is also what is carried forward from what we have already learned in the previous births, right? So even if we leave that part, because I don't know what is the kind of understanding that people have about here in this gathering, so I will not go into karma and all that. But even if we restrict this whole thing to the present birth, right, there is so much that has gone into it. It has taken so much time. Now that you have started having these realizations after acquiring this knowledge, that in your day-to-day routine, when you do so many things, you agitate so many people and you make so many people happy. So you should consciously try to gradually reach a level where the most of the people are not, you don't cause any distress to too many people. It will happen over a period of time. It will not happen suddenly, right? When that conditioning that has already happened over a period of so many years, it will gradually deteriorate. I mean, it will gradually diminish, right? And you will acquire a, even if we are talking about a higher taste, that higher taste will take some time to develop. It will not happen all of a sudden. अगर हम एक बहुत ही क्रूड से एग्जांपल से इसको समझने की कोशिश करें, मैं अपना एग्जांपल लेता हूँ, right? When I first ate cheese, I did not like it. ठीक है? Over a period of time, gradually, when I kept on eating it, I developed a taste for it. It took me years to develop a taste for eating cheese. Otherwise, मैंने तो घर में मक्खन ही खाया था. I used to have butter only, because in our in North Indian families, most of us are used to eating butter with parathas and all, right? So I didn't have that taste for eating cheese, right? It took a lot of time, even though I started eating cheese, but I started liking it only after quite a long time. Right? So in the same way, if we follow this crude example, if we develop a higher taste for spirituality, for example, and if we acquire a taste for learning these higher truths, you will learn them. The realization will gradually sink in, and then the taste for the other things will go away, and then you will stop making these these actions that are distressful to others, because you then will be conscious about it. अभी तो क्या होता है ना कि we are doing things compulsively because of our conditioning. We are not even conscious or aware about that we are doing it at times, right? So it will take time to go away. So don't worry about that. You are going in the right direction. Keep taking the next steps, right?
I'm very thankful to you, and because of you only I started reading Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And I feel happy that I could listen it twice and I started understanding it. So at least I feel some changes in myself. So, and regarding the session, I'm also very thankful to you for giving us time for such a beautiful talk and making us aware on the different actions that Prabhu Shri Krishna made aware Arjuna and other people also. So I'm very thankful to you for delivering this session, sir.
It is my pleasure and my duty also as a devotee of Krishna, because this is what Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gita. He says that anybody who wants to follow or be his devotee, it is his prime duty to propagate the message of Krishna, because it is for the society, for the benefit of the society at large. Everybody benefits, and by speaking about it, I am benefited the most.
Sir, thank you very much, sir. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Somebody has asked a question, sir, how to get. I'm really sorry. Saima Sheikh ji.
Sir? Yes, sir. So may I ask it rather than messaging?
Yes, please.
Sir, actually, you said it very correct that, okay, Arjun also said that doing is the most difficult task, actually. We know about right and wrong. We know, okay, our mind should be in tranquility. But once our mind is disturbed, it's very difficult to get back into tranquility, sir. Those thoughts will not get out of our mind. So how to get back from those thoughts and get back to tranquility? Sir, everything we know, okay, this is something wrong. We should place it at the right place. Okay, this is right. But getting back is the most difficult task. Those thoughts never leave your mind, sir. So I just want to know how to do it, sir. How we get back to tranquility and the peace, and how to achieve those ignorance, means ignore those thoughts from our mind, sir.
Your question is very, very beautiful and very correct, Saima. I must thank you for this question, first of all. And see, as I was telling Manoj, see, this is a gradual process. The first step towards this is realizing that, where we are going wrong. When that realization has set in and you try to find solutions to it, then the change will gradually start happening. We do so many things compulsively. As you said, that once the mind is agitated and disturbed, it is because we are not in control. We are letting it. And why are we not in control? Because we are conditioned. We are once the ball is set rolling, it is very difficult to control it. That is what the problem is, right? That is what you are saying. Because when the mind is agitated, then it becomes difficult to control it because of our conditioning, first of all, right? Because we are doing things compulsively. We are not doing things consciously. It is as if somebody else is, you are in control of somebody else, somebody who is agitating, or some situation that is agitating your mind. You are letting that situation or that person to control your mind rather than controlling your mind yourself, right? The first step towards is the realization of this fact that it is not the situation which is distressful or happy. It is your perception of it that is making you happy or distressed, right? It is your concept of what is good for me and what is bad for me that is agitating you, right? So once you first need to develop a better understanding of when we are in this process, what happens gradually is that you start, this feeling starts, or this realization starts sinking in more and more deeply. And then automatically this agitation of getting agitated because of the circumstances or external situations will start getting reduced. It doesn't happen artificially, first of all. When we are talking about developing a higher taste, that is a strategy towards improving your consciousness and towards bringing you to a platform where you are in a position of control, right? If you are associating with the right kind of people and if you're giving the right kind of food to your senses, then there is a lesser possibility of them getting out of control and getting agitated, right? If you are, as for example, I'll give you an example. If you are associating with people who are only concerned with material progress and their only benchmarks for success are material success, for example, which car do you have, how big a house you have, what have you achieved professionally. If this is all you will talk about throughout the day, this is what your mind will, these are the benchmarks that you will set yourself in your mind. These are the goals that you're going to set yourself for yourself, and this is what you will strive for. So your happiness, which is inspired by your association, is basically linked to what you have achieved materially, right? And if by some providence, for example, these things are taken away from you, then the entire basis for your happiness will go away, right? And naturally your mind will get agitated. So therefore, if on the contrary, you are in association of people who are down to earth, who are modest in their approach, right? Who value smaller things in life, then you will aspire for similar things. It happens this way. Association is very important. That is why they say, especially in the Indian Shastras, it is say that you ultimately become what your association is like, right? So the question that you put in, coming back to that, your mind will certainly get agitated. It is not easy to get it back right now because we are not on that platform. Once we achieve that platform through better association and developing a higher taste and adopting these strategies, then we will be in a better position. We can't, press a button and bring about a change. It doesn't happen that way. It is a very gradual process. It takes time, and you have to make a conscious effort. That is the first step. That is the first step. Knowing it and realizing it are two different things. We all know, in especially being born in India, there is no dearth of knowledge or availability of knowledge. The problem is certainly in implementing, right? The problem is in implementation only. I hope I have been able to satisfy you to some extent.
Yes, sir. Yes, I will definitely try. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aman sir. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, sir.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
We'll meet you soon, sir.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay. To all the participants, our second session speaker, Dr. Ankita Saxena, has joined. Hello. Hello, Ankita. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you, Manoj?
All good. Yeah. So to introduce Dr. Ankita, I'll speak a few words regarding Dr. Ankita. I met Dr. Ankita in 2018 at MNIT Jaipur when she was doing her doctorate with Professor Mahesh Jat. So Dr. Ankita is a computer engineer graduate, and she did her PhD in land use, land cover change, and urban growth modeling using geospatial techniques and cellular automata from MNIT Jaipur, India in 2019. She has worked as a research associate in research projects entitled Climate Change Impact Studies for Rajasthan and Resource Mapping of Earthquake Engineering Faculties in Engineering/Architectural Colleges at MNIT Jaipur, India. She is working as an environmental scientist at Institute of Meteorology and Climate Research, Atmospheric Environmental Research, IMK-IFU, KIT campus, Alpin in Germany. She is working on integration of agent-based and cellular automata modeling techniques for LULC change and urban growth modeling, LULC-based scenario modeling for planning and site selection of possible climate change adaptations. She has more than 15 international publications. Her research interests are geospatial data handling, processing and analysis, LULC change and urban growth modeling, modeling of spatial phenomena of different applications, for example, disease hotspots, scenario modeling, vector-borne diseases, ecological modeling, and crime analysis. She is like all these software. She is very handy with this multi-criteria evaluation and decision-making techniques also, and implementing this MCDM techniques in different softwares, let's say GIS or remote sensing softwares, and integrating them with the help of computer-based applications that she is expert in from the computer engineering background. So I welcome you, Dr. Ankita, for the second session. She'll be delivering today on, she'll be handling two sessions today. The first session she'll be taking on object-based image classifications, and second session she'll be taking on urban growth modeling methods and applications. So thank you, Dr. Ankita, for finding time for us and remaining available for both the sessions. Thank you very much and welcome to you.
Thank you so much for such a big and nice introduction and for giving me opportunity to deliver these lectures. I would be happy to deliver. Thanks. So should I continue?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So here is my slide. Can you see my slides?
It's showing that you have started sharing the screen, but there is no
Okay.
visibility of it. Yeah, it's there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
As Dr. Manoj has said, that first lecture is about object-based image classification methods. So before touching object-based image classification method, I would like to give some brief introduction about remote sensing, how it works, and what is behind these processes and how to perform object-based image classification. So remote sensing is, as we know, that by distant, there are some sensors, satellites in some orbits. They are capturing different amount of data set in the form of satellite data. So how they are capturing the data from the Earth surface, like we have lots of features available on land surface. For example, water bodies, built up, agriculture, different types of vegetation. So the idea is every feature is reflecting different radiations in the atmosphere. So how to utilize all these kind of radiations and to get the data and to convert that data into meaningful form so that we can differentiate all those features with the help of satellite images. So first sources are sunlight, sun in the form of sun. So sun, as we know, radiates radiation. So it interacts with the Earth's surface, it passes through the atmosphere, and then it interacts with the Earth surfaces. And Earth surfaces have these type of very features, which are again reflecting radiations in different wavelength bands. So this satellite is capturing different wavelength bands radiations. So which gives us data in the form of satellite images. So how it is stored? It is stored in some databases in the form of data, and some antenna receivers receive those satellite data. So how we process those data with the help of, we can say, some softwares, models, using our computer system. So this is all this is all complete remote sensing process, how it works. So what is behind all these satellite data? It's nothing but digital numbers in the form of brightness value. So single image is a black and white image. As we can see in this picture, it is showing band 1 image, which is against the green band. And by looking at this single channel band, you cannot differentiate different features. However, if you are aware of that area, then you can say that, for example, like I am aware of this area, and if I have some knowledge about remote sensing, that as water body absorbs all the radiation, so it will look black. And also some darker features like rocky terrains absorbs the radiation just because of shadow. It is we can say that, okay, this is water body, this is rocky terrain, but what about other features? How minutely we can differentiate all these features? So for these, we need different kind of bands. To manage all these bands, we need some methods. So to get some meaningful information, we need to combine different channels into single image. Like we need band 1 information like green, red, near infrared. So this is the thing we need to understand, we need to clarify, like every feature is not very much vigilant in every band. So for specific features, some kind of band is important. For others, different bands are important. So we need a combined information of different bands. So to produce a meaningful image, we call it false color composite or a multispectral image. We combine all these channels into a single image. So this forms multispectral image. Now we can see that, okay, this is a built up area, and this red color, different red variations are showing vegetations. So there is again not complete red color, but there are some variations of red also, and these blue variations also. So these variations are showing their density in terms of, like, for example, for vegetation, it is showing low height vegetation or dense vegetation. The image for vegetation, it is indicating that it is darker, it is dense vegetation. Likewise, for other features, we can differentiate just by looking at the image. So it is about visual analysis, what I was saying. But there are some sophisticated methods also, which can give you not only qualitative information, but quantitative information also, like how much built up is available over the land surface for a specified area, and water body and vegetations and cropland and kind of features which are available to that particular land surface. So for processing your satellite imagery, we perform lots of procedures. Those are very preliminary methods like georeferencing, subsetting, stacking. But to classify the satellite images, we need some sophisticated classification methods. Like we have satellite images of different time zones, time years, and we need to classify those satellite images, but it depends what you want in your outcome. And it also depends what kind of satellite data you have. And it's, as we all know, that satellite is about its resolution. If it's of finer resolution, then we need some more sophisticated method. And if it is coarser in resolution, then we need some simple methods will also work for those classification also. So this image is showing different time series classification outputs, which is reflecting like changes over the years, how land use features has been transformed from different years to different years, like built up has changed from 1973 to 1992 up to 2006, how it has increased. So all these kind of things we can perform with the help of change detection, which is again image processing method. And it can be used for different applications like urban changes. If you are more interested in urban rather in all the land use classes, you can always do that with the help of change detection methods. And also it is helpful in environmental change, like how environment is changing, how drought has been occurred with recent past or long back, and how coastal marine environments and desertification has evolved with the time. So all these kind of thing, environmental change, I'm saying, it helps in planning or taking proactive measures. Like if you are having an idea about the locations, how your environment is being changed with the time, it by manually or statistics, it's not possible to take proactive measures or location-based measures. So that's why you need these softwares, these methods, which can give you some quantitative informations, and you can also visualize in the form of math. For crop monitoring also, in agricultural area, how crop has destroyed with the time, means in which season it is destroying due to some other regions, you can always integrate your study like the change detection with some impacts also. So it is also helpful in analyzing impacts. Like for example, if in agriculture area, some farmers are having some losses in crops, and it is not easy way, straightforward way that we can they can analyze their extent of losses in agriculture. And if we are thinking to link it with some sort of compensation to those farmers, how much loss has occurred so that we can provide them compensation through the government norms and policies. So government officials may not always visit all the farmers and all the agricultural areas. So they need some kind of sophisticated method that can, determine by looking at the satellite images, and with the help of computer softwares, they can calculate how much loss has occurred to that particular crop, and accordingly they can distribute some sort of compensation to the farmers. So it is helpful in that sense. Also, how wetland has changed, how natural resources are shrinking in with time due to some causes, some environmental changes or maybe climate changes. So this is also helpful in that sense. And land use, land cover change is a broad term which covers urban growth, agricultural change, as I said, water body change in water bodies. So it comprises all those things. Forest mortality, here it's a big challenge in the case of forest. Some areas are very prone to forest fire. So covering complete forest fire extent by going or by, it's not possible. So we need some change detection methods for analyzing forest mortality or defoliation and damage assessment. And deforestation, again, it's at very large extent. So by and large, the meaning is that covering large extent studies and analyzing changes for large areas, we need change detection methods, which is entirely dependent on satellite image data. And satellite image data is need to be processed with the help of some classification methods, which is one of the method is object-based method, which I am going to cover in this session. And this is just an example of satellite images, like how the same area is in different seasons, how it is transforming. So by looking at the images, you can analyze, but also you can classify, then you will get information in the terms of area, quantitative sense. So this is another study which is showing how land use, land cover has changed with the time. And it is again on the basis of classification of different satellite data. So as I'm saying, different satellite data means it belongs to different satellites of different resolutions. And this is again a different case study which is showing how urban growth and water bodies, see how water body has been shrink with the time for this area. Mystery, and the red part is are built up and it has expanded rampantly, you can see in this area. So it's quite useful in that sense. It is not only giving you the idea how much area has been increased with the time, but also the directions, in which direction it has grown rapidly, and more those locations are more prone to take proactive measures, like they need to be controlled. Should not be like it should get expanded with time, but we need some proactive measures. Means urban development should be controlled, should form some policies to control those areas, urban growth. So in that respect, it is helpful to analyze urban growth and land use, land cover change. This is a different example, which is showing the change from 1989 to 2011. And again, we can see urban growth. I'm focusing more on urban growth just because my area is urban growth, but yes, of course, land use, land cover change also. But urban growth is one of the major part of any land use, land cover studies, because it is the main feature which is expanding rapidly on the cause of other land use features. So it is helpful in that sense. So this is another study of Rajasthan for different land use classes. There are water, crop, scrubland, and other watershed, how they have been changed in the past. So change detection basically is about the collection of satellite data, and satellite data could be in the form of Landsat satellite scheme. We have IRS based Landsat scheme. We have Sentinel data for better resolution, it gives us 10-meter data also. And to enhance the satellite data, we need some image enhancement methods. Like if the satellite data contains some sort of errors in the form of atmospheric error or radiometric error, so we need some kind of methods so that those errors could be removed. Sometimes in capturing the satellite data, we may have some errors. So before going to process those satellite data, we need to correct those images so that chances of incorporating errors should be reduced. And it also requires geometric correction. So your satellite image data should be geometrically corrected to provide the specific geographic location information. Otherwise, there will be no meaning in saying, in producing output, but it is not georeferenced correctly. Then your location, and you will not be able to produce proper outcomes, which should be to execute any big project. And after correcting your satellite data, and we need classification methods. So it's like the very basic method is maximum likelihood supervised classification method. Supervised classification method is about training the software. On the basis of those trainings, it classify the satellite data. So it's a training in the form of pixels. So as we know, satellite data is about pixels. Every pixel is reflecting some kind of variation, brightness values, which is corresponding to the land use feature. So supervised classification involves signature selection corresponding to different features. For example, it's just like sampling. We are taking sample for water bodies. We are taking few samples for urban areas. We are taking samples for dense forest. Some few samples for your trees, your shrubland, your water body, your rocky terrain, open area, scrubland. So it depends how many number of classes you are targeting, and which should be available in your area also. If water body is not available in your area, usually it's not possible for a bigger area. But if you are focusing on a very small area, then you should be aware of your region, what classes you are targeting. So accordingly, you need to take samples for individual classes, then train the algorithm by providing these sample data. And the software does in the form of like neighborhood or maximum likelihood, it classifies, it uses those samples to classify the complete data just on the basis of you provided your training sets. So its accuracy, final accuracy will entirely be dependent on the selection of samples which you have collected. So that should be more accurate. That will provide better classification. Otherwise, it will, will have to, if it is not enough to produce accurate classified output, then you will have to repeat that signature selection procedure. There are few methods also that can evaluate your signatures, your sample selection, if it is correct or not, like contingency, ways. I will discuss that also in briefly. So after taking selection of samples, you produce classified outputs of different years. If you are targeting change from different years, so you should classify satellite images of those years. And then using change detection methods, you can analyze final change by visually or one-to-one, like from change from one class to different classes. there are permutations and combinations of number of classes in which you classified your satellite data. So for all permutations and combinations, it can give you change. So there are different change detection methods, like we have algebra-based approaches, which includes image differencing. Image differencing of different years, it's just single band data. And you can divide, you can difference those bands, and differences in their brightness value will reflect the features, change in features. So it works in that way. And second one is image regression. We perform some regression methods to get the changes, and image ratioing methods also. We take a ratio of brightness values. It's and another one is vegetation index differencing. It's very specific to vegetation data. Like if somebody is interested in analyzing changes in agricultural area or vegetation area. Vegetation can comprise maybe agriculture, trees, your dense forest. So to capture vegetation only, we can always take vegetation index. It's like NDVI, natural difference vegetation index based methods. Similarly, we can also take water index for water bodies to analyze the changes, and for built-ups there are some built-up indices also, like built-up index and DBI, normalized difference built-up index. So these how these indices work. Another method is like transformation, which majorly includes principal component analysis method. So principal component analysis is about reducing the redundancy in the channels, informations. Because if we have lots of channels, bands, some bands may be redundant with other bands. More than two bands might be giving you the same information. So we can always reduce those numbers of bands so that the chances of introducing redundancy will be reduced. So it's another method of change detection. Similarly, tassel cap is for a large number of bands. We can use tassel cap as a change detection method. So there are so many methods based on our requirements, and also the extent of your study area and at which resolution you are focusing, you have data. It's because we have freely available data not corresponding to the very fine resolution data. Like QuickBird is expensive. It's corresponding to 2.5 meters data. So if you are interested in very fine analysis, fine features, so you need more sophisticated method to classify and to analyze the changes. And for coarse resolution or medium resolution, sometimes simple image differencing and post classification methods also works. So now we come to object-based methods. So object, as the name suggests, I was just discussing before that pixel-based method, supervised classification, maximum likelihood supervised classification, which was considering pixels, informations in the form of pixels. So, but here the idea is objects. So we should not think about pixels, but the objects. As I was saying that QuickBird, I was giving you an example of QuickBird image, or maybe GUI of 0.5 resolution, 0.5 meter resolution. So all these images are of very fine resolution, and Google Earth, which is on the basis of GUI satellite GUI data. So it is of 0.5 resolution. Even we have better resolutions also, but we need some sophisticated method to handle those high resolution, high quality data. because we can clearly see looking at the image that it is our agricultural boundary, it is road network, it is water body, it is built up. Sometimes we can see the heights also of built up. So, but we cannot classify that high resolution satellite image just on the basis of pixel based methods. So we need object based methods. So how good it would be if we digitize all the features just on one click. So yeah, it can be done. It's just one click is corresponding to the image segmentation. Image segmentation is segment the complete image in number of objects, similar kind of objects, homogeneous objects. So how you will form those homogeneous objects? Behind that, there are some characteristics like their geometry, their shapes, their area, their extent. So these characteristics play an important role in deciding the objects. So segment object-based classification involves two main things: object segmentation, and then on the basis of segmentation, you perform classification. So it's 2 clicks in object-based classification. First, segmentation, in which we are digitizing the features which are available in the image, and we are not training the algorithm with the help of pixel-based data set, but here we are providing or training the software in terms of object sampling. For pixel-based classification method, we were providing pixel-based image, pixel-based feature selection, but here we are providing object-based information. Like we are saying this particular shape belongs to this particular class, and this particular means we are deciding the range of area, it belongs to that class. It could be anything. It could be against the brightness values also. The range of brightness value is corresponding to that class. So there are lots of possibilities of classifying a satellite image on the basis of objects. So human visual perception almost always we can better say like this is river, this is this feature, this is that. But softwares cannot do by their own. So it's always better to train them in a better way. So traditional way was pixel-based image classification, as I already discussed, because pixels are always corresponding to their neighbors, how their neighbors are. So the neighborhood concept was involved in that. And in object-based, we have segments, means group of pixels. We are not simply focusing on single pixels, but a group of pixels of similar type, homogeneous clusters or homogeneous set of pixels to which we are referring object. So we have vector objects, and we digitize this in the form of segments. Like we can see that in this image, these blue color is showing the homogeneous segmentation of the image. So there are, if you will zoom this image, you will see that there are different clusters of objects which are corresponding to the similar objects. So how it replicates the entire image. This is a beautiful image which is produced from the object-based classification by segmenting the image. So this is how we provided the information to the software in the forms of segmentation, and it produced the image like it is showing. Pink color is showing built up part, and red is also corresponding to the built up. There are different urban classes like road and buildings and residential and commercial also. So this fine segregation is only possible with object-based classification, because we always have an idea about residential, how a residential will look like on how multi-floor building will look like. So you can always differentiate such denomination of urbanization by using object-based classification methods. So if we want to understand segmentation is nothing but just to break the image up into number of objects, land features, which is available in that image, and perform on the basis of segmentation classification for complete image. So what information you provided in the form of segments for different land use features, it automatically classify your image just by looking at the shape of the features and size, maybe spatial resolution and spectral brightness values also. So these properties are very important for the classification of satellite images using object-based methods. So when we segment an image, then we always form group of pixels to form an object, and we cover different land use features in one go. So it's an example of 50 centimeter resolution image, which is including multi-resolution segmentation. Means it is considering multiple resolutions together to form a rule set for the segmentation and later on classification. So by combining different resolution, we frame a rule set. So it's not only about shape, size, or resolution, it's a complete rule set in which we are considering multiple your shape and size should belong to this this range, and the resolution should be like that. So it for corresponding to a feature. So for different features, there will be a different rule set. A single rule set will comprise all these characteristics, but not only one. So we have lots of options in object-based on the basis of which we can classify a satellite to go with different methods and combine all those methods together within a single rule set to produce your final segmentation and classification. So, it depends how big your object is. So your scale parameter should be always on the basis of that. Like if your object is very fine, but you are giving larger range, you are deciding scale, you are increasing your scale parameter, but it is not appropriate for your image. It will not differentiate among different features if your scale is higher for a larger object. And also you can segment by providing weights. So as I said, rule set comprise different characteristics. So which characteristics you will prefer more for your object. So you can always weight characteristics, like for this feature, our red band is more weighted, means this will give you more information as compared to green band or blue band, or maybe shape or size. So accordingly, you can relative weights you can provide for individual characteristics and put it into your rules. Similarly, segment, there are different softwares to handle these segmentation and classification. Like we have ArcGIS. You must have aware of this ArcGIS software, which is very popular one and useful for image analysis and also for classification, image processing and image analysis software, which also provides object-based image methods, object-based image classification methods. But eCognition is more versatile in that respect. If you are targeting object-based classification, then Trimble's eCognition method is more helpful. It is a complete pack which has lots of options, lots of methods which can give you better object classified output. So this is the output against by providing different weights to different rules. So what we can see in this image that we have included spectral and spatial details and NDSM, which is against the which is against the weights you are providing. So it's output against how you have provided to different characteristics of objects, because objects have different characteristics in terms of its compactness, its size, its area, and its spectral characteristics also. So we provided the weights against these characteristics to produce the final outcome using ArcGIS segmentation. And this is again in the ArcGIS, and how segmentation is let's see this, how minutely it is creating your features with the help of segmentation. So see how like each edge is, each edges is covering boundaries, differentiating with another boundary. So it's how fine it is, but it is not possible in pixel-based image classification. But object-based classification method can give you this opportunity to differentiate among different features. So as I was already discussing this thing, if we are more interested in few features which are corresponding to water, so we have water specific indices. So we can put that formula of NDWI, normalized difference water index, into the rule set. So we have those options also, rather going only on the characteristics of the objects. We can formulas and we can extract water from the satellite images where the water is available. So, and for trees, because it belongs to the vegetation class, so NDVI will work in that case, and we have higher reflectance in near infrared band for trees. So we use near infrared and red band to compute the NDVI normalized difference vegetation index. And for buildings, we have normalized difference built-up index, urban index. So these are different indices for buildings. So higher the range of the indices, higher or maybe denser the feature is. So this concept works in that way. And for grass, as I said, it belongs to the vegetation class. So NDVI will work for that. And for roads, because it is made up of bituminous and asphalt, so it is this feature. This material is also used in constructing the building, so it will always mix up with the buildings also. So this is the problem with the pixel-based image classification method, like it is not able to differentiate between built-up and road networks. But with the help of object-based classification method, we can differentiate, because road is a linear feature and we always have its width. A rough idea we have that it should be of this if we are targeting main roads or highways. So we have idea of the width of the roads. So, and it's a linear, so we can frame rules in a rule set or while doing segmentation and buildings. So in for different features, we can see that for different features we have a different rule set in cognition, and we perform those rule set over the image of good quality, fine resolution. Then it provides finally the outcome. And as you can see, it's very clearly, we can see that what feature is what. So this is the as I was saying, that eCognition have more options as compared to ArcGIS. So we should, I'm not advertising Cognition, but yes, we have better option in eCognition to sophisticatedly handle the object-based methods or fine resolution images. And like, for example, we have LIDAR. We have lots of satellite images which are producing very good quality data. But if we don't know how to handle those data and how to process those high quality data, then it's not of any use. So it's better to know those methods which will work better. Otherwise, if you will perform your pixel-based methods in this high resolution images, it will always be giving you the salt paper effect, because it is classifying your satellite image on pixel basis. So always you will find that there is salt and paper effect in the satellite image is for a fine resolution if you are not considering object-based. So it's helpful, and it is always helpful in good, big projects in which this quality information is required. So we'll go with object-based methods. And like for set one, resolution satellite data, and it's just vice versa. You can perform just for experimental basis, but it is not advisable that for coarse resolution data, you should not go with the object-based classification method, and for finer resolution satellite data, we should not go with pixel-based data, because it is always misinterpret the software, misinterpret the pixels and objects, and it will not be able to provide the meaningful information, or will not be able to differentiate the land use features appropriately. So this is an example from unsupervised classification. Unsupervised classification is pixel-based method, which is even coarser than supervised classification. It is helpful in giving features which are available in a land surface. So it is helpful just to decide the number of land use classes, but not the complete classification. We should not use unsupervised classification, because it is, as the name suggests, that it is unsupervised classification. So like it's not involving any kind of external information, not any supervision like you were providing in the case of supervised classification. You were training the algorithm by providing the number of samples against different land use features. But in unsupervised, you are just giving the numbers. You are saying this like image and this is the number. For example, n number. So you need to classify the satellite image in n numbers. So what software will do? It will use some available methods, like by default it is isodata algorithm. So on the basis of that algorithm, it will check the brightness value in the complete image, and to classify in the number of classes you have provided. But it will never go with the neighborhood characteristics and with the characteristics or any other thing. But because as we know that there are different satellite bands, and each feature may be reflected in different bands. Your vegetation may give some brightness in different band, and red band also, near infrared band also. So there are chances of getting misclassification if it is not considering additional information in addition to the brightness value only, because brightness values may mix up with different land use features. Like I was showing you an image in the beginning, that water body was darker, and for rocky terrain, just because of shadow, it was darker. But both are different features. So handling those complexity of images we need better methods. So for that, unsupervised method doesn't work. Supervised method can work, but for medium resolution data. But if we have option to deal with high resolution data, finer resolution data, then we should go with object-based, which can provide you better and accurate information. Sometimes accuracy matters a lot in some applications. In some applications, so where accuracies matters a lot, you can choose object-based methods in that respect. Yeah. So for image classification, extraction of information classes from multi-band raster images, it's image classification. Like we have multiple bands and we have to extract information from different bands. So we always perform image classification. So satellite image classification, as I'm saying, image classification, image is, as you are all are aware of remote sensing applications. So yes, it is satellite image classification. And for image classification, we have pixel-based methods. So for pixel-based methods, the fundamental unit is pixels. And for objects, we have objects, that means group of pixels. And classification, in the case of pixel-based classification, it is on the basis of brightness or spectral information corresponding to different bands. And we have methods like unsupervised and supervised. And for supervised methods, we usually use maximum likelihood classifier, which is like the maximum probability of being classified into a particular class. So it checks the maximum likelihoodness of individual pixel to classify into class. So as I said that in supervised classification, we have number of classes. For those classes, we collected the samples and we have now training data. So, and the rest of the images need to be classified on the basis of satellite, on the basis of our signatures of training samples. So it is checking each and individual pixel is being checked against those training sets. So maximum likelihood classifiers used in that case. And for objects, we have a fundamental unit image objects, like group of objects in terms of maybe geometry. Geometry could be of any type, circular, rectangular, or maybe polygon, or there are so many shapes. So we can always consider all those shapes. So classification based on the spatial information along with spectral information. As I said, it is considering spatial information of different bands in classification. And for the methods in object-based techniques are like nearest neighborhood methods and fuzzy classification methods. And two main steps we have: segmentation and classification. First, we need to segment the image of similar objects. It is again a kind of training to the softwares, but in terms of objects and segments. So for segmentation, we use a rule set. So we define a rule set, and on the basis of those rule sets, which is comprising different characteristics of an image or an object. So on the basis of those segmentation, final classification is performed. So how it is better as compared to pixel-based method? It is reducing the salt pepper effect just because it is not targeting each and individual pixel, but the objects. That's why it is reducing the salt pepper effect. Salt pepper effect in the sense sometimes just because of shadow in the road networks, just because of trees. For example, there are trees along the roads, and it is casting a shadow on the roads. So that part may appear darker in an image. And if you will go with pixel-based method, so where there it may show you darker. So maybe it will be a part of water body, because water body is also absorbing all the radiation. So it can give you water there, but it is not available there. So in that sense, geometry works. And geometry in the sense of length and width, it works in, so you can define the length of roads and the width. So it will accurately classify in using object-based classification method. So automatically that salt and pepper effect is reduced, which is against, present in pixel-based method, but not in object-based. And also it is giving you an idea about real-world features. If you will look at the final output of pixel-based methods and the object-based method, it will be very clear by looking at the object-based output that it is giving you the real picture of the land surface, but which is more, which is better as compared to pixel method. And it is because it is not giving you salt paper effect, and it is giving you real view of the satellite present data, and that's why it's good in accuracy. And but the limitation with the object-based method is that you should have high quality images, high resolution quality images. So because high resolution images have more content and more differentiation among land use features, which is absent in coarse resolution imagery. And you can increase the spatial resolution. Single pixel no longer capture the characteristics of classification target. Yeah, it is very true that if in pixel-based method, if we are targeting only pixels, sometimes a single unique pixel is not sufficient to give you the complete picture, complete information of the land use feature, but which can be obtained in object-based group of pixels, which is again including the different characteristics in terms of geometry, which could be anything: circular, road, circular, rectangular, and it could be of any shape, any geometry. So this is the additional advantage in terms in object-based methods. So these are the previous studies which were done in object-based and pixel-based methods. It's a near method used and fuzzy classification technique. Fuzzy classification is a fuzzy rule sets, means trying different rule sets for the classifying the same sort of features, and then figuring out that which rule set is working well for your features, because it is always not possible that same sort of rule set will work for every feature, but it will vary with the different features. So different rule set, fuzzy classification help in determining the different rule sets for different features. And it gives you more than 90% accuracies when we use fuzzy classification, means group of rule sets you are including in your classification. There are some GLCM methods also, which is incorporating PC and your different rules, and again it's increasing the accuracy. But it depends what features you are targeting. Based on that, you need to select your rule. And multiple segmentations also perform. So there is no single segmentation kind of thing for every feature. If you perform separate segmentation for separate features, it will give you better accuracy, better classified output in terms of object-based classification. So because, as I said, objects could be of any type, any shape, any size for different features. So if your land use land cover have different land use, different features, then you should prefer segmentation or in different, against different characteristics and different, by including compactness, scale, and ratios. And for creating DEM, stereotypes images are used. So object-based methods also work for creating DEM. And like NDVI, GLCM, these kind of methods were also used, like brightness values and standard deviations between the brightness values. So characteristics to frame the rule set for your object classification. And there are some random forest classifiers also, which sometimes works better for classifying the images. So knowledge-based classifier works in the case of pixel-based method, maximum likelihood supervised classification, which is you can also club maximum likelihood classifier with object-based also, because it's about rule set. So rule set can comprise maximum likelihood supervised, maximum likelihood classifier, and also means the idea is like you can, what pixel-based classification is giving you as a classified output, you can always club that those methods with your object-based methods to produce even better outcome. So this is an advantage with object-based classification. So now it's a study area of Ajmer in Rajasthan. So for that, a comparative study has been done using pixel-based methods and object-based classification using high resolution, you can say high resolution of 4.8 resolution, about 5 meter resolution data. So it's the study area, its population, how the climate of Rajasthan Ajmer is, and the availability of water bodies. It is surrounded by a lake. Main lake is Anna Sagar and Pushkar Lake. And this is the study area. So for study area, we used LIS4 and LIS3 satellite data. LIS4 is corresponding to the 5 meter resolution data, which gives you 3 band information, and LIS3 gives us 4 band information. So we used, it gives us 3 bands and 4 bands, but we choose 3 bands in LIS4 and in LIS3 4 bands to produce our outcome. So it's brightness values, digital values, which is lying, which are different for different layers, layer 1, 2, 3 in LIS4, and for LIS3, these are different in different channels. So this is the information about the satellite data which we used. And the softwares were used like ADAS imaging for performing image corrections and performing supervised classification. And ArcGIS was used for image analysis, for preparing maps and assessing accuracies of the final outcomes. And eCognition was used to perform object-based classification, because it's better in handling high resolution and also for producing object-based classification methods, because it's had lots of varieties of methods available for object-based classification. So we have ortho-rectified satellite images, which means which are ortho-rectified automatically, means we had the data which was ortho-rectified, so we didn't perform any kind of image improvement, image enhancement technique. But we have different bands. So different bands to form a meaningful image, we perform FCC, layer stacking, to combine all those bands into a single image. And then signature selection for the satellite from the satellite images against different features for water bodies, built up agriculture, trees, forest, and sandy area. So for different classes, we selected the signatures, and signatures should be it should be n times the number of bands you have. It is always recommended that you should collect the number of bands n times the number of bands you have for individual classes, so that it will give you complete information. Not complete, but yes, very it has chances of giving you better information. If you will go samples that may not include all the information, so will not give you the final outcome better. And for this, we use maximum likelihood supervised method, classification method. So likelihood was checked for individual group of pixels, means individual sets of samples for individual land use class. So each pixel was checked against the samples you provided for different land use classes. So based on that, on the basis of likelihoodness, it classified the complete image. Each pixel was classified into some classes on the basis of training you provided to the software. Later on, we merged the classes which were giving you almost similar information, like there are variations in vegetations, but in the final outcome, if you will see that sometimes it's not giving you much variation, then we finally merge those classes to produce the final outcome. And later on, we perform the object-based classification. The initial process was same, like rectified satellite images, the same images. Subset and we produced the final FCC by performing layer stacking. Then segmentation was performed on the basis of the compactness of features and the objects. The scale was decided. So after deciding the compactness and scale, the segments were formed in the complete images. So the segment, then that segment was used to produce the final object-based classified outcome using the nearest neighbor classification method. So this is how we perform the comparison on the basis of classification accuracy assessment and visual interpretation also. So how segmentation was performed, like splitting up an image into images, number of objects, number of segments, especially adjacent pixels of similar texture were combined into a single object. And also color and tone were playing a role in giving us in framing the objects. So we used texture, color, and tone for framing the objects, and multi-resolution segmentation was also added with those characteristics like like homogeneity and which minimizes the average heterogeneity. Means what it is doing, it is more focusing on homogeneity, framing the homogeneous objects, but reducing the heterogeneity among the image objects. So how it that's how it added the value to the object-based rule set. And then merging of pixels. Then it merged all the pixels in a group of homogeneous pixels, homogeneous set of objects on the basis of color and shape. So merging is entirely on the basis of scales and its shape. So there are some methods which we are considering with some characteristics which we are considering, like color of the images, color in the sense of how it appears to us, and compactness, how compact you are thinking an object should be, and means how compact your object should be. It will cover your feature you are targeting, and smoothness also. So these combinations were used, and finally a threshold was decided, so which is called as fusion value, which should be less than with the scale parameter you decided. So this is how it works for your segmenting an image. Then for final classification, we used nearest neighborhood method. The neighborhood concept is included in that sense. The segments will always check neighboring pixels to combine to form even bigger objects, so to produce the final classified output. So nearest neighborhood is used in producing the object-based classified output. So this it is working behind creating the supervised classification, and fuzzy classification method is also included with nearest neighbor classifier, which helps in defining rule sets by different rule sets against different features, and different rule sets are performed for a feature, for classifying feature, but it should not be redundant. It should not be like if you are giving similar kind of information in different rule sets. So it could be different on the basis of compactness, shape, color, texture. So these all are defined in a fuzzy classification rule set, and which is working well, we can determine by producing correspondent output. So it's against your images, it's a part of segmentation, and then it goes to your classification. If its segmentation works well, then it will also create your final classified output corresponding to the final decided segmentation rule set. So there are some description about the methods, like we are considering brightness, how it works. It's a description, and maximum difference. Sometimes differences in brightness values is appropriate for determining the features, and ratios also works. Brightness value ratios and mean differences between the brightness values and NDVI. There is a difference. It is a difference between NIR, near infrared band, and red band, and some arithmetic features also can be used to segment your images. Like you can create your own formulas also. Sometimes fuzzy methods also works. Like those are no fuzzy things are like those which are not existing, but sometimes it's working for your case. You can, it's a just kind of hit and trial which method is working for your feature. So that also works. So this is another arithmetic features, like division of brightness values over mean layer 1. Mean layer 1 is something like band 1, and maximum difference over mean of layer 3, and likewise. So there are some GLCM mean method also, which are helpful in producing better segmentations. And sometimes circular mean also works in creating segmentation, and there are some HIS transformation methods. So there are lots of methods. It is not completely, set in the beginning that, okay, you should select this method to produce, to classify this feature. But it can be refined during segmentation when you are performing segmentation, object-based classification. And for few features, of course, you have an idea that this method will work better, but sometimes it depends on what kind of data you have and what your objectives are. So based on that, you always can go with fuzzy systems, which is trying different methods, which are not available. But yes, you are trying by hitting different options. And sometimes you can combine different methods together to segment the images. So this is the outcome against pixel-based methods. Initially, spectral profile were generated for different land use features in different bands. So in different bands, how a feature is being reflected means to determine the visibility of different land use features in different bands. So we draw spectral profiles. So based on that, we considered only those bands for producing, for getting more information against different bands. So this is the outcome from unsupervised classification. As I said, that unsupervised is not very reliable in big projects or applications when you are supposed to give you are supposed to make some decisions, then you can never rely on unsupervised classification. So you can see that it is giving you a very blunt classification output see, we have this 4 data, which is of 5-meter resolution and 2015 from Landsat. So for medium resolution, it is fine that it is giving you an idea about the classification, about the land use features. But if you are performing the object-based, the pixel-based classification for such a high-resolution image, so it's not giving you the outcome better. This magenta color is against the built-up, and see how it is misclassified in this high-resolution images when you have performed the pixel-based method. And yeah, but it can give you the idea about the number of classes available in the image, but cannot be helpful in producing the final outcome, final classified outcome. So then we perform the classification using supervised classification. So this is the histograms against the different samples which we collected to train our supervised classification algorithm. This is our samples should be always in a bell-shaped curve, because it's always recommended that the samples you are selecting for a particular class, and so it should belong to that class. It should not be misinterpreted with other samples. If a sample is being involved in if a few pixels is being involved in a sample which are also present in other samples also, which are corresponding to different class, so it is always going to be misclassified with other land use features. So that's why this is the way of evaluating signatures which you have collected before directly going into the classification. And this is another method of analyzing your signatures, like contingency matrices, which you create a matrix, and for each and individual combinations, you check how many number of pixels or how percentage of the pixels is being misclassified with other samples of different classes. So here you can see that for paved to paved, there is 100, because yes, it belongs to paved. But you can see for built-up class, 0.05% pixels are being misclassified with water. And in other cases, some 0.02 are being classified, rocketeering pixels are being mismatched with water. So these kind of possibilities you need to avoid. Sometimes it's unavoidable just because of their similar reflectance. But you should always try to limit this thing, this misclassification, and if it is possible, because it will be giving you the misclassified output in the end. So if it's a higher than what you decided, a critical, okay, let's say in my outcome, I don't want a sample should not be mixed with more than 95%. I mean, yeah, 95% is sufficient in my case. If until 5%, maybe it will work. So likewise, you can decide your way of signature selection. And it's not like it's a choice, because it also depends what you want from your outcome. Sometimes more accuracy is not required, very fine accuracy is not required, then it will work. So this is the outcome from supervised classification. So it is even better from the unsupervised classification. It's like magenta is showing better, blue is against water body, red is shrubs. But yeah, there are some features which are being misclassified with this rocky terrain. Like if you will see this brown part, this is rocky rocks in Ajmer. But these are being misclassified with what built up. It should come under this rocky terrain brown category just because of similar reflectance. It is not able to capture the correct class, which can be avoided with the help of object-based. We'll see if it was able to capture these minute differences in object-based for the same sort of images. So we attained the accuracy more than 60% for individual images. And object-based classification, it's an optimal combination of combinations we selected or using segmentation. And after obtaining the desired segmentation, we performed the classification. So optimal segmentation is that we can by looking at the image, we can see that okay, our objects are being segmented appropriately, but not complete accurately, but it will work for us. Then we stop segmentation process. That stage is known as optimal segmentation, in which our desired accuracies is achieved. So if we have under segmentation kind of thing, then we should perform segmentation again to refine, to capture more information of the objects. So this is how we selected scale. So we tried these 7 combinations for scale, smoothness, compact for different years. Like for different images, we have not selected the scale, smoothness, and compactness for different years, but different combinations we tried, because they all were of different resolutions. So for different resolutions and different images and different classes, we should target different scale and smoothness and compactness. And we used multi-resolution chessboard poetry segmentation approach to perform the segmentation. Like multi-resolution is about bottom-up approach, region merging, in which we start from a big region, from a small region, then we merge all those regions, then it is bottom-up approach. And then chessboard, it is again a different type of segmentation method, in which segments are divided in a number of cells, which is considered as top-down approach. And again, there is a different method, poetry, which is following the top-down approach. So it is a region splitting. multi-resolution is about region merging, and chessboard and quadries are about region splitting. So advantages of multi-resolutions are like segment the image on the basis of shape, color, and size, and it yields good abstraction. And it's more powerful and simple method. But the disadvantage, on the other hand, is like it's time-taking process because it's a region merging. It's starting from the basic smallest unit to form a bigger region. And it cannot be used for large images because it is time-taking process. So yes, for bigger images, it would be a commercial task to segment the image with this method. And it is, again, it is taking high memory. And for chessboard, it's a fast process. It produces regular square objects, as the name suggests. And the disadvantages are like it's generating all objects in a square shape, but it is not giving you the correct shape of that object. And it does not consider color and shape of object. Yeah. That's why it's the drawback of this chessboard method. But it is better in the case of quadry, like it's fast processing, same as with the chessboard, and it is producing regular square objects, less heavy on resources compared to multi-resolution segmentation. But the disadvantage of this method is it generates all objects in a square shape, the same with chessboard. It's a slower processing than chessboard when image is large. Yes, and large amount of objects are generated in that case, if it's a quadry. And multi-threshold is a region splitting top-down approach, and segments are on the basis of color contrast. It is fast processing, good for creating initial layer. For initial segmentation, it's good because we it's not single segmentation. We perform sequence of segmentation, get satisfied with the segmentation. It does not consider object shapes, same with above two methods, and thus it sets the criteria needs knowledge about the spectral profiles of classes. And another methods are spectral difference, which is bottom-up approach. It's a region merging in which segmentations are on the basis of shape, color, and size. It can only be performed on previously created objects. Yeah, for it's not a basic method, means it is applied over if already segmented image to refine even more objects. And another method is contrast filter, in which it helps removing the objects that won't be classified. Sometimes there are some objects which are formed during segmentation which cannot be classified, but those can be removed with the help of contrast filter. And contrast split is good for classification layers such as like vegetation, NDVI, and water. And its results are sometimes difficult to predict, and it segments objects only, considering brightness values. So these were the comparison of between different segmentation methods. So this is how the segmentation looks like. So it's just a small sample of a satellite image against a different segmentation. Like first one is showing the chessboard segmentation, and quadry segmentation, contrast. Chessboard and quadry segmentation give us square-shaped objects, don't represent real-world objects, as I said. And multi-threshold segmentation generates object segments, which are only on the basis of color. And contrast filter and split methods are using brightness values and complicated sometimes to interpret the final results. And this is how, if we vary different scales, shapes, and compactness of the segment of the image. So it is, as we can see, if we have reduced, we have started the scale with the 2, And if 5 and then 7, the objects are getting even bigger. So sometimes this first one in time, tiniest objects are not appropriate to classify image. Sometimes, for example, you can see this water body in the center dark. So this is complete water body, and in which if you are deciding your scale as small as 2. So there's no meaning, it is complete a water body. Even a bigger scale will work for that. Like shape and compactness, you can determine the shapes, how shape scale is, how shape threshold is sufficiently determining your land use feature. So accordingly, you can vary the shape threshold, and also compactness of the complete object. That threshold can also be varied. So as it indicates, higher scale, larger size objects, and lower scale for smaller size objects. So this thing we should consider always during segmentation. And it's by incorporating multi-resolution segmentation, then with the same characteristics of scale, shape, and compactness. This is the final outcome for the same list 4 images for the year 2015, which we performed for using pixel-based classification method. And these are for year 2000 and 2004. The same land use classes we chose to classify, and we can see that overall accuracy has improved as compared to pixel-based method and pixel-based method of supervised and unsupervised methods. So this is the comparison. This is the object features and methods which we used, and what ranges we considered to obtain these land use classes. Like for built-up, for classifying the built-up and water, we consider arithmetic feature 2, and we decided these ranges. And for rivers and arithmetic feature 3 method was chosen, and the corresponding range was this. And circular mean, layer 3 for rock shadow, and different methods for against the different land use classes and their corresponding ranges. So we arrived at these ranges and these methods by performing number of trials and number of methods to obtain the final outcome better. And these are the different methods which considered in our study. So here you can see that for list 3, there are different methods and different ranges. And for different satellite image of list 3, we have different methods and different ranges for the same land use feature. So it depends on resolution and quality of the data and for different land use features. So this is the comparison between pixel-based method and object-based method, and see how accuracy has improved for list 4 data of year 2015 from 62% to 87% accuracy has been improved with the object-based method. So it says the accuracy decreases with the increase in spatial resolution when performing pixel-based method. But it's better, it's just reverse in object-based method. If you are increasing the resolution of the data, your accuracy will always increase in object-based method. Same for object-based classification. When used for medium resolution, the accuracy will decrease, but for pixel-based, it will increase. Not increase, but yeah, somehow it will give you better results. And this is the comparison table of area and different methods in different land use classes against different years. So how the trend of built up has been urban trend we can see is increasing in year 2015, but on the causes of water and vegetations. And this is zoom differences, visual differences we can see. As I was saying that built-up was being misclassified with rocky terrain using pixel-based method. As you can see, this pink color is, this magenta color is showing the built-up over the lands, over the rocky terrain surfaces. These are the errors which were removed in object-based classification. So in object-based classification, the rocky terrain was better classified in object-based. Yeah. So those misclassification were significantly removed in overcome with the help of object-based classification. So this is the clear advantage we can see in object-based classification. And same with water body. If water body and other, it's vice versa. Like with pixel based, if you are using medium resolution data, then it was giving you better information. You can see number 2, water body is completely classified as a whole. But since it was including so many information, shape, compactness, sizes, area, so on the basis of that, it uses that those rule sets and information to classify the image. That's why it misclassified other land features. When we were using the medium resolution satellite data. So here the complete study summarizes in that sense, like for high resolution data, we should consider object-based methods, and for medium resolution data, we should use pixel-based methods are sufficient to produce meaningful output. So these are the limitations. Pixels represent only digital value of any land cover, and pixel-based classification produces salt and pepper effect for high resolution data. And it's difficult to change the classified signature in pixel-based classification method. That can that can be easily done in object-based classification method, because it's just about changing the rule sets, values. And in case of pixel-based classification method, you will have to repeat that signature selection process, but that is very easy in object-based classifications. And problems in classifying the subclasses. At a broader scale, like if we talk about built up, so as a whole, it is okay with pixel-based, but if you want to urban classes like industrial, residential, commercial, so such minute information can only be obtained with object-based, because it's about shape, sizes, and other characteristics of urban, which cannot be taken up by pixel-based methods. So this is the limitation of pixel. And the traditional pixel-based method does not give satisfactory results as when the classification is performed on high-resolution images, because there are so many spectral variations. Because high resolution definitely containing lots of information which cannot be handled within a 1 pixel. 1 pixel may not be giving you the complete information. So we need a group of pixels or objects to produce better informations and more information. And advantages of pixel object-based methods are like image objects hold meaningful information such as spatial, it is giving you spatial information, geometrical and structural and neighborhood relationships also. So in that way it is useful, and objects are more reliable unit to classify than pixels. That is very true, because if group of pixels, if you are using group of pixels also, then pixel based in pixel based method, it's a real idea about the shape and size of the object, which is possible in object based methods. And image objects extract the information from particular data layer, all the layer later fused. So the idea is it is not considering the composite, a single image, but also considering different channels, different bands, and their corresponding brightness values to prepare the rule set, and against that rule set to produce final classified output. So it is very helpful in producing meaningful information. And GIS reference information, so it can be processed in any GIS software because it is raster. Final outcome is in raster and can be easily processed, analyzed and processed after final classification. But like it is required that you should have high resolution data, which is sometimes very expensive, and sometimes it's useful that it's not required also. Then it's okay to go with medium resolution. But yes, if you are going with object-based method, so you need high resolution, high quality data, which is expensive sometimes, and it's a time-consuming process, I would say, sometimes because you are not able to produce the accurate segmentation. You are not able to produce the accurate rule set, which is corresponding to the land use features. So it's a hit and trial way of obtaining a rule set. So that takes time to decide what rule set will work for which land use features, because it's about all minute, about considering minute information and detailing of the land use features. So, and accuracy also depends on the segmentation parameters what you have chosen. That should be chosen very carefully. So it will directly lead to your classification accuracy, better classification accuracy. And segmentation parameters selected for a particular class or image may not be suitable to another image. So that's why you need separate segmentation rules and classification rule set for processing a single image. Same sort of rule set cannot be applied for every image. And we need to develop new rule set for every image. Yeah. And pixel-based methods have better accuracy for low resolution images and very poor for high resolution images. And object-based methods are superior to pixel-based method for medium to high resolution images in terms of accuracy. Object-based are suitable for high resolution, as I already discussed, and multi-resolution segmentation is best segmentation method, uses scale, shape, mode, color parameter. When we are performing multi-resolution segmentation, then choosing scale, shape, and color parameter are more appropriate in multi-resolution segmentation. And while we are going with fuzzy classification method, and then we have better accuracy for higher resolution images. It's the same with all the object-based methods. And the nearest neighborhood method gives us better accuracy for low to medium resolution images. So this is a classification comparison, which method is better for which kind of resolution. So it's saying that nearest neighbor is better for low to medium resolution images and fuzzy is better for high resolution images. These are a few important references which you can consider. If required, I can share this. Thank you for this patience listening, and yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ankita.
It seems if you have any question, please, you're welcome.
There are many questions, 2 questions which have been typed in the chat box also. Being a non-computer engineer, my network is not working in my system, so I'm dialing it from my phone. The thing is, being non-computer science engineer or graduate, I couldn't understand that how these automatic thresholds are being fixed for different type of images. So can you please explain it?
Yeah, you can always, being a computer engineer, you can always take your advantage of your background when you are focusing on a larger scale imaging. And as I said, that every image has different rule set, and every region and every feature has different rule sets. So it's a one way, I would say, that you decide a rule set for different features and you can parallelize your region. And in one go, then you can obtain the outcome, final outcome for the complete region. So it will reduce the time, computational time, and in one go, you can have better accuracies and better trials. Yeah.
And one more thing, like I want to ask, what about these computational time? Have you compared these computational time for the different type of segmentation processes that are there? Like in like theoretical manner or qualitative manner, you have explained it that these are the better ones as compared to another one. But are there any computational times also being recorded? Because like for analysis of any performance of any software or any kind of such algorithms, we require 2-3 kind of parameters. One is the accuracy that we are talking about. Second is like the computational time that we should talk about, and then the like easiness of the computational model or the, let's say, architecture of that particular algorithm. So did you compare all these things also, or?
Yeah, or not very large, not at very large extent, but yeah, it's a very straightforward to understand which segmentation method will take more time. And time, there is one computational time which is required in segmentation. Another time is the hit and trial time, which is taking lots of time to decide which segmentation rule set will be appropriate for determining land use feature. So that's why it is hits and trial is also consuming time, lots of time. But yeah, it's for a better thing. Like if you are able to produce a good rule set for a particular land use feature, then it's helpful to produce the final outcome. And if you have taken the scale of very small size for performing, as I have shown in my pictures, for water body, which is a complete body, and you are selecting small scale. So which is not required. It depends what land use features you are targeting. So it's always, it should vary. In my opinion, it should vary with feature to feature. Means if sometimes very minute scaling is not required for the complete water body. For say for water body, it could be built up or anything. So that's how you can reduce the time. And it is always varying. It's not fixed with any application that how much time it is going to take.
Thank you, Dr. Ankita. There are questions.
If I could answer your question. Yeah.
There are questions though, but I'll restrict these questions to the next session because there is already like it's 2 p.m. here and we'll need to start the next session at 2:30. So I hope during this time you can have your lunch or breakfast at your place, and the participants will also be able to join it back.
Yeah, I would be happy.
We will take up the questions in the next session.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
Thank you, Dr. Ankita. We'll continue in the second session, third session of the day.
So next session is around 10 in according to here 2 there.
Yeah.
2 or 2:30.
2:30. Yeah, it's already 2 here.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll take a break.
Yeah, see you soon.
Meet again.
Yeah, see you soon. Yeah.